Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox. Today, we're going to talk with documentary filmmaker and writer and journalist and advocate, David France. David France is one of the people in the documentary film world that I have more respect for than virtually anybody. His work is stunning, it's amazing. He makes works of art as well as works of activism. And that is a tough thing to do. It's what we all strive for in the documentary world. The film that he burst onto the scene with that made him a household name in the world of documentary filmmakers was How to Survive a Plague. It was nominated for the Oscar, and it details the rise of ACT UP, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, ACT UP in the mid-'80s to late 80s in New York City. Something near and dear to me because as a 17-year-old in New York City, growing up in the midst of that plague, I was very concerned, and I actually went to ACT UP meetings, and I wrote about ACT UP for my high school newspaper, and I went to ACT UP frequently and went to their demonstrations, so I felt like I was a part of that organization. And seeing that on film was so stunning for me. So I want to talk to him about ACT UP and about how important it was in the history of activism and all the wonderful things that they did. But his new film is called Welcome to Chechnya, which is about the repression of homosexuals in Chechnya by a strong man installed by Vladimir Putin, who is literally rounding people up and torturing them and forcing them to inform on their friends, and in some instances, likely killing them. And about a group in Russia who is smuggling people out of Chechnya and trying to get them visas in other countries. It's extraordinary work. So we're going to talk about that. And we don't often talk about implications for homophobia and how that intersects with the Green New Deal. So we're going to talk about that because actually David France and I know each other from the fracking days in upstate New York when he was reporting on that. So it's a great honor, a great pleasure to bring David France onto the program. David, I talked a little bit about how we knew each other back in the fracking moment, but so we could talk a little bit about that because this is a show essentially about the Green New Deal. But I wanted to explore first your work, How to Survive a Plague, Welcome to Chechnya, and talk a little bit about that for people who are not conversant with it, but also to see at the end, maybe we can talk a little bit about how these things intersect. But first of all, thank you so much for being on. It's great pleasure.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been so long since I've seen you. It's really great to be with you, even like this. So
I know, it's been a while. I don't remember. I think it was at a film festival, I think, or the last time, maybe Tribeca, maybe Sundance, I don't know. But I mean, How to Survive a Plague, for me, can we talk about that first?
Sure.
There's so many things about that era which are so relevant right now, because as I was a teenager in New York, growing up in the midst of that plague,
That's right,
and just becoming a sexual person at that time, you know, and so it was extraordinary because I went to ACT UP meetings, and on 11th Street or 13th Street, 13th Street, and I went every Monday night. And I wrote an article about it for my high school newspaper, and I went to all the as many actions as I could, and it was like a very important thing for me, just to discover life and what people were doing in activism, and to see that film, How to Survive a Plague, which does such an incredible job of documenting the feelings of that time, the moment. It's just very emotional to talk about. And now here we have Dr. Fauci in the mix. And I couldn't believe when I saw his name. I was like, is this guy still around? You know, because he was in many ways a kind of villain at that time. So talk a little bit about How to Survive a Plague, and then we'll move on to Fauci. But if you don't mind, going back in time to 2012 when that film came out, because it was such a powerful thing. Yeah.
Well, like you, I spent my Monday nights there at ACT UP meetings. And I was a print journalist back then, and I would go to those meetings to find out what was happening in the world. And it was the days before social media, before the internet.
No internet.
If you wanted information, you had to go and find it. And that's where people went. That was like the World Wide Web, was that room at 208 West 13th Street, Monday nights. And you remember they were packed. Hundreds of people. And these were people, some of them would come straight from their hospital rooms, looking for information on what to do next. You know, what are their options? Do they have options?
Mm-hmm.
And there always was an option. That was the exciting thing about that room, is that the reason we were there is because we were looking for hope, and the room had hope. And the hope may sometimes have not led in a straight line to, something useful.
Interesting.
But it was always this powerful thing. And I had written about AIDS for decades. And when I decided to go back and try to look at that period again and see if I could learn something new from it, and use it as a chance to try to tell a story in a different way. That was my move into kind of visual storytelling.
Which all your films have been remarkable in terms of their rhythm, not just their the way that you put the information together as a journalist and telling a great story, but also somehow the spirit, the emotional spirit of them, and the art of them. And to me, that was a big part of ACT UP, was the art. I remember, when I learned about it from my stepbrother, who came home with one of those Keith Haring T-shirts. It was the wonderful Keith Haring art. And you'd go to those meetings, and there would be a table at the back with all of the Grand Fury stickers. The Silence Equals Death, Men Use Condoms or Beat It was one of my favorite ones, that were there. And you would just go, and they were free, and you could get all these great stickers. And it was our job to just plaster the subway with these Silence Equals Death or the turnstiles. But I also recall how every meeting would start off with the people who had died, talking about the people who had died. And it was just like, this was the crisis. This was unbelievably emotional. And I think you do, I can't remember the film from my own recollection sometimes, but I think you cover some of that in the movie. How did you deal with the emotional nature of that time, and also just in trying to figure out how to separate the person who has to be clear-headed to make a piece of art or a piece of journalism with the incredible strife of that crisis?
That's such an interesting question. I was going to say that the thing about making that film was that I had to stop being clear-headed.
Interesting.
I had to let, those emotions come. Which is something in the middle of it that no one could afford to do, right? That we had to bottle that stuff up to get through it. And those moments at the beginning of the meetings were really moving, because there were these statements of a memoriam for people who had been sitting there just last Monday. I think the reason that nobody had gone back to that period of time to make the film was because it was so much more, somehow strangely, difficult to revisit it than it was to live through it. Because you had a choice, then you had an option to not go back.
I think that's an incredible point, because I think there was a feeling of necessity, and that is what I've measured all of the activism I've done since. I remember a meeting when we were in the middle of the beginning of the meeting, and someone rushed in and described that there was a gay bashing incident on the street, and that the people who had been hurt were in the precinct, and they had been arrested instead of the people who had beaten them up. And the whole meeting got up, suspended the meeting, and a march happened spontaneously right that moment for 300 people going to the precinct. Now, I was in high school, so I didn't make it all the way all night, I was but I remember this, and I've measured every single activist, the feeling of that, whether or not it was a committed situation, by that day. Because I think sometimes I'm with a lot of professional activists, from the environmental movement. And I think, would they stop this meeting right now and go barricade what it is they're talking about? And if I don't feel like they would, I try not to spend so much time with them. And I try to find the people on the ground who are actually in that spirit. But it comes from that moment.
They set a standard,
Yeah, for sure. I have to say, you're tuned into Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. We'll be right back. You're tuned into Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm with David France. Let's talk a bit about, I don't want to interrupt you if you have more to say on that. It's a hard subject. I'm like, It's hard. There's, especially being in the theater in New York. My dramaturg friends who are older than me they talk about how they lost somebody every week.
Yeah.
And this was the crisis of Fauci and the crisis of AZT and the crisis of when is the medicine coming and Reagan not giving any money. It's so many things that feel like this moment with Donald Trump. Of course, it's very different, extremely different, because it's not just, this is everybody. And it took a long time for people to understand that AIDS could be everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it
still
talk
have
about how.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. This right.
Yeah. It's
Talk
still
about how.
somebody else's fault or some slip or something. And, yeah.
Right. Is there a correlation a little bit to the hostility against science, the hostility against in this moment that you can perceive?
Oh yeah. I mean, we have such a parallel now with the Reagan administration back then that had this ideology this extreme ideology of that was the first arrival of the Christian right to the political landscape, and they believed that morality was the governing rule, not science, in HIV. And this administration is also ideologically driven, but the ideology is about money and about personal gain, personal wealth, personal fortunes. And for the same reason that they have obscured the science. And we've seen it happen from the beginning. Now, I believe that there's, you would not be able to convince me that the Reagan administration and Reagan himself were not practicing some sort of, evil and immorality. And not just Reagan, but Bush and Bush again, where it came to HIV, but meet Kentucky. But I don't think any of it really rises to the level of what we've seen with this administration. This is like kind of the when you add just abject ineptitude to it, and that's where you get the kind of mass death that we're experiencing now and will experience in horrific quantities over the next couple of months. And it's unimaginable what we're going to experience.
And it's interesting because of Dr. Fauci is still there. Yeah. Talk a little bit about his role back in the day and now what he represents.
Fauci comes on the scene. HIV was first described in 1981. 1984, Fauci takes the job that he currently holds, which is the director of the National Institute for Allergies and Infectious Diseases. He was a young clinician / scientist / politician back then. And he made a lot of mistakes. He made mistakes that cost people's lives. He was always genial. He was always tended toward a kind of a liberal view of the role of science in society, because unlike many other scientists, he saw patients. He has continued to see patients, even today. And on top of running his lab and running his institute. But he had a lot to learn about the humanizing of science. It's not just him, it's all of science had a lot to learn. And that's the thing that ACT UP, without really knowing that it was setting itself up to do, took on. This revolutionizing about the way science is conceptualized, the way science is practiced, the standards to which science is held, and that is that it be responsive to a crisis, that it be nimble, that it be urgent, that it be activist, and certainly ethical in ways that it had never thought of itself there's, people who studied science never understood or were asked to understand humanity. There was somebody I remember speaking to in the early 90s, a bench scientist, who said, we don't think about who takes these pills. We think about what the pills do, in the body.
Wow.
Not about the body itself,
Right.
but about the mechanism, not about the collective impact of a drug, but about the marketplace for a drug. So it all got divorced, and ACT UP mended that. And the first person that they took on to do that with was Fauci. And Fauci became an ally and an important one. And he began to do that work at the NIH, the world's preeminent research facility, and has continued to do it today. And you see that now with his work on this bozo coronavirus task force, that he has he's been the voice of science. He maintains his position as a politician. You'd want him sometimes to be more of an activist, and we've seen him sit next to Trump and not say the things that are going through his head, and you want him to say those things, but he remains a politician, which is how it is that he's been able to stay in this job forever, and how it is that he's been able to move politics forward.
It's amazing to watch someone learn, as we have in our movements also learned, right? And this is one of the things that's interesting, as a correlation between the ACT UP politics moment and that movement and what's happened with fracking and climate change, right? Because when I first made Gasland, there was no science pretty much at all on fracking. And the oil industry could come in and say, you're just, this is nonsense, this is all scare tactics. And then people like another Tony, Dr. Tony Ingraffia, who was on just a few minutes ago from Cornell, the rock fracture mechanics scientists, they started to do science. And then all of a sudden, 10,000 peer-reviewed reports that suggested exactly what the citizens were saying, and that there was a scientific way out of the fossil fuel addiction. Of course, that doesn't cover, it's been a struggle to bring these things together, because there's renewable energy people who are for just want to make money.
Yeah.
They're not listening. And so that's why it's so interesting to talk about the Green New Deal as being about the frontline communities and about justice. It's not about solar panels and about wind turbines. It's very correctly focused on the idea of justice, and that we cannot, intersectional justice. So just transitioning, maybe we'll get to that in a minute, but transitioning to the movie, Welcome to Chechnya, which is about as frontline as you can get. I watched it the other night. I'm a little late to the party. I'm a member of the Academy, so I'm doing all the review for looking at all the movies. So I watched it, and I found it just an unbelievably remarkable feat of daring from journalists, of emotion as storytelling, and of technology as well, which we can talk about. So just set it up for us, the crisis in Chechnya. I did a little bit about it in the intro, but tell us the basics first.
Well, it's really unbelievable, Josh, that in the world today, this is going on. It hasn't happened since Hitler, that a government leader has directed a top-down official campaign to round up, detain, torture, and eliminate the LGBTQ citizens in their ranks, right? Like, not since the Holocaust. And here it's happening in Russia, and the Southern Republic of Chechnya. The news broke in 2017, in April 2017, that this was happening. It was a horror. It was just a horror. But you'll also remember that in January of 2017, another horror took place, which was the inauguration of Donald Trump. And as we now know, that just sucked all the air out of every newsroom. And this thing that was revealed, which was denied by Russian authorities, just fell from headlines. And I kind of convinced myself, because it's so easy to do that it had somehow taken care of itself. That's why we weren't hearing about it anymore. And it wasn't until the summer when the New Yorker published an article about what ordinary Russians were having to do in the absence of any sort of political outcry from world leaders in order to respond to this. And that's what the story Welcome to Chechnya is about, is what they're doing, what they're having to do. And what they're having to do is like right out of the resistance to the Nazis. It's people just like you and me who are taking on these incredible risks to rescue people and to hide them, and to work to build this vast underground railroad to get them out of danger. Turns out they're never out of danger in Russia. They've got to get them out of Russia altogether. It turns out even in the rest of the world, they're being hunted. This has been described as a blood cleansing campaign by the Chechen leader, who actually has this perverse thought that he could somehow eliminate LGBTQ people from the Chechen ethnic minority, and that's what he's engaged in. And he's engaged and empowered the rest of the Chechen population to take part with him in this campaign. Family members are now under pressure to find and route the queer relatives from their own families and to turn them in, and to carry out so-called honor killings on top of everything. And it's just a horror. There's no telling how many scores or hundreds or thousands of people have been impacted by this. Family members, when their queer children are taken from them, know not to speak up, or their families will be punished for generations.
And that happens in the movie.
Yeah.
One of the people who is this underground railroad, I mean, it's just extraordinary. There are people in Moscow who are going into Chechnya under cover of darkness in one way or another, smuggling people out of Chechnya by plane or by car or whatever, finding them a place, a safe house to be. And then they have to find their families safe houses as well. And there's one moment where a whole family has to be evacuated. And there's this one moment where one of the sister of, I think it's the sister of the person, lost her boyfriend because of it, because she had to just leave, and she leaves her boyfriend behind. And you can see this look on her face of, my heart broken, but I'm going to leave. It's just extraordinary. And hold on, I have to say, you're tuned into Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal, and we'll be right back. You're tuned into Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox. We're talking to David France. David, so tell us, how did you manage to pull this off? Because it must have risking your life to do this.
Well, I told you that I learned that, and it wasn't until I traveled there that I learned how frightened the people who survived this are, and how much they knew that they would never be safe. So I reached out to the activists first and said, can I come and talk to you about maybe documenting this? And they said, yes, but you're going to have this problem, which is that these folks who were getting out are just can't have their identity revealed in any way. Because even if they get to, Paris or Berlin or London, and no one got to London, or Toronto or Oslo, they are being followed. The diaspora, the Chechen diaspora, is called upon to bring them back. So it's not enough to get away. This is a liquidation campaign. So I went and met the folks and started asking them, talking to them about what they wanted. And so many of them did want to say what happened to them. They wanted to be able to reclaim their own narratives, to be able to decry these crimes without bringing more harm to themselves, and they had suffered so terribly. So I said, let me try to find a way to disguise you, and I'll work with you. I want to shoot you. I want to be here with you. I want to embed in the system, fill my hard drives, encrypted hard drives with this information. And I won't use any of it until we come up with an agreement about how you'll look. And that allowed them to open that window for me to see what it's like to be them. Not just the rescuers, the heroes that we're talking about earlier, but the refugees, the survivors of this unspeakable campaign who have been, ripped from their own cultures and from their families. They'll never be able to see their family members again because of this war. They'll never be able to speak their own language again. The Chechen ethnic minority speaks its own language. It's this rich, ancient culture that they are now exiled from. And I got to see what it was like to deal with that reckoning, to suffer from that reckoning, and just witness the emotional journey that this has taken for them. And it's a journey that was surprising. And I hope you saw this in the film, that was also about love. I mean, it's about love of the place that they're being exiled from, but also this developing love that you can see come on them for their community. It's not possible inside Chechnya to have a queer identity. It's unthinkable. And in the dark nights of their arrival at this shelter system, you begin to see them coming to an understanding of themselves as a people that was so tremendous to watch. And
that does
blossoming of that soul, and that's what I wanted to find a way to do, and that's what I came back to New York with, all that footage, to say, can I work with this footage, disguise them in a way that doesn't take away that journey, that doesn't take away that the very essence of their humanity that they have said to me they want to express through this film, and that was my challenge.
And that comes through in the safe house. The safe house is sort of like this weird, like the real world of MTV. If the people in the real world were being hunted, this was but you could feel the love that they have for each other, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the family. I mean, that community. And when there's a moment when one of them, not to give anything away, but tries to commit suicide, and there's this incredible complexity of like both being incredibly worried about this person dying, but also saying like, you're going to get us all busted by doing this, because we can't take you to the hospital. What are we supposed to do? This insane crisis of being a person who, as you say, is being hunted. And it reminded me a lot of the stories of my grandparents who fled the Nazis, who came to New York after all of their relatives were killed. And the shatteredness of my grandparents. My father got to this country when he was 8 years old, having been born on the run in Kazakhstan, actually. We talk about Kazakhstan because of Borat, but it was actually a safe haven for Jews fleeing from the Nazis. But anyway, the point is that the shatteredness of that and the displacement of those people in a genocidal type of campaign that's happening there, but realizing also this moment of love and camaraderie and mutual support in the open as something that has never occurred in their lives before. It's really, really extraordinary. Were you worried? I remember when I was shooting in China and we got in trouble. We were surrounded by the Mongolian secret police, and I had to sort of smuggle out my footage out of my hard drives in my banjo, inside the banjo, because the banjo has open part. Anyway, I'm giving away on my own movie. But I thought, oh my God, this stuff is never going to see the light of day. I will lose all my footage, and all of the dissidents who spoke out are going to get in trouble. Were you ever worried that a hard drive might fall into the wrong hands? And how did you establish that trust with the people who you were filming?
Well,
the first thing their lives just to talk to you.
We established these rules about the hard drives, right? So we moved the digital files off of the cards immediately and onto encrypted hard drives. And then we overwrote the cards, not just deleting them, but overwriting them so that you could never resurrect that information. And we did that before leaving the safe houses. And we made multiple copies of those encrypted hard drives, so that we were carrying them in different ways and moving them through different people, and over different paths to get them out of the country immediately. Assuming that if we lost one or two or three, we'd still be okay. And no one could get into those hard drives because of the encryption keys that we were using. So we were very, very careful about that. But there were times when we weren't filming inside the safe houses, like during those extractions that are pictured in the film. And for those, those were very risky, because if we had been stopped and if they had ascertained our purpose, either because we were filming, they captured us filming, we've given ourselves away, we've given away the people who are fleeing, those people would be in danger. In fact, pretty certain what would happen to them. And the activists who are helping them, it's pretty certain what would happen to them. And then me as the kind of the lone American filmmaker there, I didn't have reason to believe that I would be in that same kind of, life or death situation. But the footage could reveal even other people and other extractions, and so we were really, really, really careful, and it was very scary. And I did get detained on the way out of Chechnya after one of the extractions. And just our protocols really worked. It was about planning. It was about knowing what to do. And I was posing as a ridiculous American tourist, shooting everything on my phone. But I had two phones, and the second phone is what I was shooting the film with. And when I was brought into questioning, I dropped the production phone, if you will, on the floor in the car, and carried the other one in. So when asked for it, I was able to show it. It was full of just, selfie after selfie, and all the beautiful kind of vista cinematography that is available in Chechnya. Is a really beautiful part of the world. And they just were able to really feel me as being a tourist that wandered way too far off the path. Mm-hmm. And they rushed me back into the car and made sure the car was heading in the proper direction outside of the region, and let me go. So we were very lucky.
Wow. I mean, these are terrifying incidents. You're tuned into Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. We'll be right back. You're tuned into Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm with David France. So David, tell me about the digital techniques, because this is really amazing. Because what's amazing about it is you're not watching people who are unemotional. You're watching the emotion, you're watching the expression, you're watching the feeling, and you get attached to characters' faces who are not their real faces. How did this happen? How did you do this?
Well, I needed to disguise them, as I said, and I'm a relatively new documentary filmmaker, so I don't really know what the toolbox holds for this challenge. So it wasn't until after I filmed, really, that I came back and said, okay, now what are we going to do? Like, what is there? And there's the blur, and there's the pixelization, and there's more modern things, like there's that Snapchat stuff. You can put dark glasses on people,
right?
And bunny ears, and all of.
I'm glad you didn't do that.
all of those things were really working against that emotional journey that I had experienced, and that I wanted to be able to convey to the audience. And we tried rotoscoping, we tried everything. We brought in artists to try to do kind of artist interpretation, which I felt that was too far removed from the actual experience that they had, to have somebody come in and kind of remove them from the frame and put their own version of that experience in. And I wanted it to be more journalistic, I guess, which is my background, is in journalism. And it was months into the R&D that we found people who had been experimenting in this kind of far edge of artificial intelligence. It's a technique similar to fake, only just the opposite. Like I kept calling it deep truth, right? Because like nothing about it is changing anything, right? So what we've been able to do, I'll just tell you what it is. So there's 23 people in the film who needed to be covered. So I went to 23 other people who didn't look anything like them, and I asked them if I could use their face as a kind of a human shield to protect the people in the film. And they were mostly recruited from the activist communities in New York and LA, mostly queer activists who had already been engaged in activism around Chechnya and around Russia and around refugee issues, queer refugee issues. And they immediately agreed. I couldn't tell them what the project was because we were filming in secret. If anybody knew I was doing this, it would just blown the lid off of everything. So when we finished with the film, we brought those activists, those volunteers, those face doubles into a green screen environment and ingested their faces, filmed their faces in a way to bring them into an algorithm that would then map their face pixel by pixel over the face of the people who I had shot. And it doesn't change anything about the action that those people, like Maxim Lapunov in the film, he's wearing somebody else's face. But that's Maxim. That's his performance. That's what I saw. When Maxim in the film cries, he cries through someone else's face. And this is all done in this artificial intelligence, deep machine learning way of like literally transplanting one person's skin over somebody else, kind of in its post facto way. It's just phenomenal. When I first saw it, we looked at an example of it, and it just brought tears to my eyes. Like it totally eliminated Maxim. Like he was gone. Somebody else was there living his life, doing his things. And I said to Tyler Walk, the editor, we know now that we can do this. You know, we had shot an entire feature film. We had edited an entire feature film. And only then did we find a way to make us believe that we could.
It's like there's it's this incredible leap of faith, right? I directed a dance piece one time where the actors were all walking forward, but they couldn't walk forward because they were walking on chairs, and they would take a step, and the actor would rush around and bring the chair for their foot to step on, and they would take another step, and the other actor would rush around. It was like this moment where you feel like you're falling, but somehow you have faith that there's going to be something that will allow this to occur. And that is an extraordinary leap of faith, and it pays off amazingly. Everyone who watches this program, you must watch Welcome to Chechnya. And I think, just to end, to bring some of these strands together, Russia and Putin's Russia seems to be such an incredibly toxic, world-destroying type of regime. We see, thank God, that Trump is going away. But from from this incredible genocide campaign, homophobia campaign, to the climate campaigns and the misinformation campaigns on fossil fuels. Talk about how dangerous this regime really is.
You know, in a really important way, I think that Putin has led the world into this right-wing turnaround against expertise, against modernity, even against justice, against science, and he's done it for all the obvious reasons: political gain, political power, the prize of the totalitarian. And he got it. He's got lifelong power now in Russia, and people have followed suit, including Donald Trump. and we've seen the entire forward motion, I think, of humankind arrested by Trump and his actions. And certainly where it comes to LGBTQ liberties, he has turned the scale that way. And we've seen it follow in Poland, where a third of the country now has adopted gay-free zone ordinances. We've seen it happen in Hungary. We've seen it happen through Africa, Tanzania, Nigeria, South America, Brazil of all places, where the anti-queer, anti-trans, anti-LGBT government there is making life impossible for gay people there. And we're seeing it even in the United States. I mean, even in the United States, where I have been around long enough to have witnessed most of the advances of the queer movement. And to see them so challenged after just 4 years of the manias of Donald Trump has been shocking. And that's why I call the film Welcome to Chechnya, because I think we're all heading to Chechnya. And I think Chechnya is coming to us. And if we don't respond to these things, not just the human rights, not just the queer rights, not just the environmental rights, but unless we respond really aggressively and never rest, this is always a possibility that we'll be dragged backwards like this. I never thought that it was true, but we've seen it happen, and it is a frightening call to arms for us.
Well, David, I appreciate the film so much, and thank you so much. We're out of time, but that's a perfect note to end on it. That we have to be active, we have to be vigilant, and we have to do everything we can to fight against these types of authoritarian forces and violent forces of intolerance and hatred. So thank you so much for the work. I think it's absolutely extraordinary. Everybody watch it.
Thank you,
where can we watch? Where can we see the film?
You can see the film on HBO or in Canada on Crave, or in various places around the world on various platforms and distributors, including, as of last week, Russia, where BBC News Russian has taken us out in front of their paywall, and we've been able to do this by avoiding Russian censors. So we've brought the film back to the place where it was filmed, and that makes me feel really, really good to be able to tell this story to Russians who have really no idea what's going on in their own country.
Thank you. Incredibly brave. Thank you so much, David. And so that's our show for today. You're tuned in to Staying Home. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Cenk Uygur is not here today, which means that I will be able to talk during the show. No,
We'll see. We'll see.
Poor Cenk, under the bus.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? Now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, Weezy. Everyone should be lucky enough to have a John Iadarola in their life.
You confused everyone.
Okay, sorry. I thought it was pretty clear.
Take a break now.
You can turn me to Dr. Manhattan as long as I get what Dr. Manhattan's packing, okay?
The liberal mom says, Mark Thompson, have you ever thought about doing one of those tapes that soothe people to sleep? Like Mark Thompson reads the phone book. I'd buy it.
If you'll buy it, I'll do it.
Emilio D'Amelio writes in, John, you are so thick. I love you. That's what he wrote.
Pork Chop Express writes in and says John Iadarola needs a new jacket.
Whoa.
Those 24-inch pythons are about to burst out of his sleeve.
Guns, baby.
You know, the two people here said that their moms were both in love with you over Beauty and the Beast?
Mm-hmm. That's an improvement. I usually get grandmothers.
Charlie Kirk.
No, wait a minute, don't you dare.
Chemical castration when we return from the break.
I hope that, who they choose for the White House isn't just a borderline Klansman. That's all we gotta hope.
That's it. We will settle it.
She's cute. I didn't say that about Laura Ingraham.
Scandal at TYT. Did Anna comment on my tan yet? No, she hasn't.
You're a good bosser.
But Anna did say that I come in here today with a fresh mind. That's all I'm about. I'm about a fresh mind.
I can't with you right now. Okay?
She just can't. She can't, but nonetheless, we have to for another 3 hours. I'm back, baby. Let's rip into Republicans. See, don't miss the live show.
That's great.
Tell people, if you're a member, you get the whole live show whenever you want, because this stuff doesn't go into any of the clips.
You are the media revolution. You are much needed.
TYT! TYT!
The place is like 95% TYT on.
You guys, the Young Turks, which is my favorite channel, we're getting that message out.
Cenk and the Young Turks do an extraordinarily good job.
No matter what mainstream media says, you have to listen to the Young Turks.
All the people who support us on the internet, that's what gives us strength. That's what allows anyone who was in there who was undecided to think one side seems to be winning, they seem to have a bigger army. There might be a reason for that. So thank you guys.
Across the map are going to be so tight and so close that it is likely going to be very difficult to call this on election night.
The twin forces behind the Biden candidacy, the billionaires and the Bolsheviks.
Arizona, 19 million. For the vice president, 9 million, a little over 9 million for President Trump.
We are desperate for Donald Trump to not be president anymore because he's fascist and is a threat to our democracy. And we said that from day one. Yes, we want Biden to beat Trump. Is that clear enough?
It is increasingly difficult for the American public to get any sort of truth.
And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
Here at TYT, we strive to instill confidence in our voters by educating them with factual, reliable, and easy to understand political information. And that's why we've partnered with Politiscope. Politiscope is the easiest way to understand the policies that your elected officials vote for and against. They also have the same goal of changing the perception of politics and reshaping the way political information is sought out and consumed. Politiscope strips away all the unnecessary complexity of politics and empowers voters with raw, unbiased information about elected officials and the policies they support. You can download the Politiscope app on the App Store or on the Google Play Store.
everyone. Welcome to the conversation here on the Young Turks. I'm your sometimes host, Francesca Fiorentini. What is up? It is around Thanksgiving, and I hope everyone is safe and happy and healthy. Okay, just mostly healthy. What is happiness in the year 2020? I don't know, but my first guest is gonna help us find a little bit of it. She is the co-creator of The Daily Show, the founder of the reproductive rights action organization called Abortion AF. And she's got a new stand-up special. Did I mention she was a comic? Called Corona Borealis that she filmed all in quarantine. Please welcome Liz Winstead.
Hey.
What's going on, Liz?
Just here with you, hanging out, just doing it like everyone, figuring out how to make isolation great again.
Absolutely, except Zoom stand-up shows was not good enough for you in the year 2020, and you decided to film a special.
I did.
Tell me about it.
I'm somebody who responds to the world. It's what I do. And I grew up in Minneapolis and I live in Brooklyn, both. And so being quarantined in New York City in the height of the pandemic, and then watching my city burn because of the murder of George Floyd, and it wasn't even because of the murder of George Floyd, it was because of so much of police brutality and violence. And the latest was George Floyd.
Yeah.
And then this election we were having, I was like, I need to respond to this. And so I came back to Minnesota and I decided to do a show where it was shot in two parts. The first part was 20 people in kayaks in water, and I'm on the shore of a lake. Totally socially distanced, just a crew of 10 people. We all built the set. We all designed the set. I made food for the audience, these special individual meals where I baked and cooked. And then people got in these kayaks. And then I couldn't do a show about 2020 without having the election. So I had 18 people around 6 fire pits in a 19-degree evening a week ago. And I finished out my show in this wooded setting. And sort of did this 3-quarter wrap up of the world and kind of examined COVID, what that felt like for me, what I was doing, sort of systemic racism, examining sort of my own white privilege and how I played a role in that. And then just breaking down the election and what it feels like to vote for somebody who is better than the person in office, but then realizing that now our work is to hold them accountable. And so I took it all together and I barfed it out in this crazy DIY show. And also the thing that was hilarious though, Franny, and you'll really appreciate this as a comic, when you're doing things like this, so we were outside the whole time to be distanced. There was never any going in. Everything was outside. Everybody was apart.
You chucked people beers from shore.
We had things set up. We actually had people bring care packages out to their vehicles, and then they came in with a bag of stuff. But here's what's nuts. So we had everything on generators, so you're panicking the whole time. So my whole thing that I focused mostly on was, let's make sure the lighting stays on, that we can see. What didn't occur to me was the entire time you're performing a show out in the woods, your natural sound is crickets. So if your jokes don't land at all, we had to edit out crickets because it sounded like a joke. It was unbelievable.
You're like, did we mic the crickets? Is that what happened?
It felt like it was a cartoon. It was like a cartoon.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that I think is so important. And by the way, Liz's special is on Vimeo, $3.99, super accessible, and you can watch it again, all about the election before and after. But it's so important because comics don't have shows and places to perform anymore, and so we're struggling. And this is a great way to support, obviously, Liz's comedy, but also just the broader, stand-up realm beyond Netflix. Let's be real, because they get enough. They have enough money. It doesn't.
They have enough money. They have also, comics go there and do their thing, and they're in a big, fancy schmancy thing with a whole bunch of audience. And so this is very, very intimate, very raw. I use notes, I stumble, but it's also, there's
very 2020
specials that can respond to the world so quickly and get up and that's why you have to self-produce so that you don't have to deal with network notes. I put it out there, I'll take it. I'm gonna get so many haters, and I'm fine with that. I'm good. I run an abortion rights organization. I already know what a hater feels like.
Liz Winstead, someone who has never been afraid of haters, never let them keep her work down. And part of that work obviously is continuing being at the helm of Abortion AF, which is, I think in and of itself, such a groundbreaking organization because of the way that you tackle reproductive rights with a lot of levity and humor and honest personability, if I can even say that. Why do you feel like Abortion AF does that? Like, why create a reproductive rights organization that isn't afraid of comedy and mocking the other side?
I think, for me, the main thing is, so for the years that we've talked about abortion, we've talked about it using the narrative of anti-abortion extremists and activists. And I believe that abortion is normal. I believe that abortion is a part of healthcare. And I don't believe abortion is any of the things they say it is. So why can't I use humor when it comes to making fun of the people who are hell-bent on destroying bodily autonomy for people? Just like any other orc who is out there, who is just feeding off misogyny like a host, they need to be taken down. And the best way I know how to take people down and to call out garbage is to do it through humor.
Yeah. I believe you once said to me in an interview that it was very difficult to mock Trump. I mean, it's easy to make fun of him, but almost like not rewarding because he is a walking satire himself. And that look at him, look, this is the entire administration. Now that he maybe will be gone soon, still fingers crossed. What are you looking forward to in a Biden administration, and specifically from the right, from beyond comedy, but from reproductive rights? What needs to be on the forefront, do you think, when it comes to reproductive justice in this Democratic administration?
Well, I think that there's two things that need to happen. We need to raise the Medicaid reimbursement rate so that we can end the Hyde Amendment. That's going to be the number one thing, so that poor people, people of color, people who need to access abortion care, and who don't have jillions of dollars or insurance or are using, Medicaid, can pay for their care. I think that's crucial because right now abortion is an out-of-pocket expense, and a lot of people don't have that. And if you can't afford to terminate a pregnancy, makes it really hard to afford to raise children, right? So those things are inextricably linked. I think just having them talk about abortion and talk about reproductive justice, and also just saying to people, let's start honoring all pregnancy outcomes, right?
Yeah.
If somebody is poor and is pregnant and wants to have a kid, we should have programs in place for them to be able to do that so that they can have a healthy family. And if somebody is poor and pregnant, or not even poor, let's say poor out of it, just pregnant and says, it is not within my capabilities to raise another child or have a child, let's honor that, right? So I think honoring all pregnancy outcomes is a really good path and a really good thing that we should all be talking about.
It's always striking to me that people hate Planned Parenthood so much when the name is literally Planned Parenthood.
But politicians hate a plan.
Right, exactly.
For the most part.
Especially Republicans, no plan, just destruction. No, I love the way that you say that, honoring all pregnancy outcomes and just how much reproductive justice is about that, is about supporting parenthood if one wants it and chooses it. I guess.
And to create healthy environments to raise a kid, right? That means they should be able to walk down the street and not be harassed or killed by police. That means that they should be in a neighborhood where there is healthy food, healthy grocery stores. They are not living in an environmental disaster of a neighborhood. They can access drugstores and prescriptions and have diagnoses for all the things they need. It's just large large justice for the greater environment for which we all live.
Well, there's so much more to talk about. Liz, your special Corona Borealis is gonna help us through it. I know, I'm excited because it's gonna I feel like it's a bow on this, this crap year. I can't say what I wanted to say there.
I know. Crap year is the way to say it. That's the nice way to say it. The crap year.
But please be so well. Have a good end of your year, and we'll talk very, very soon, I'm sure, about the next chapter in this fight.
Oh, there's gonna be many more things to talk about.
We're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the US and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're gonna make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning.
She's gonna win. She's gonna win.
68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight, and that is exactly why they don't like us.
We're having fun. It's election night.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley. Down goes Crowley. Down goes Manafort. Down goes Cohen. Women came out in record numbers in the primaries. They said, you'll be lucky to get one candidate. We now have 12 that have won their primaries.
Bezos and Amazon announcing that they are going to go to a 15-hour minimum wage.
We're making progress. Let's keep going.
Many of these women made history.
The biggest victories, all women of color. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland.
And I want to go to Congress because I want to change those things.
I'm calling it. Jamal Bowman has won. Down goes Engel. Down goes Engel.
For a long time, we have not had progressives in power. It's going to be something to behold.
Welcome to Happy Half Hour, everybody. After a week of soul-crushing news, we break out the good stuff. Good news, good videos, good people, and of course, drink good alcohol. That's the worst thing I've ever had.
This is the best show.
Full disclosure, we did do a shot right before the show began. It says,
Let's
flamingo.
Flamingo.
The reason you had trouble with that word is it's not a word. Okay. This is the one of everything.
I've got a rash. Could I just put it on that to see if it'll take it off?
What did you used to think this was?
Bull piss.
Drink it, swallow it, spit it. Oh, that's needed after a day like this. Cheers to Brett Ehrlich. Climax. Uranus smells like farts. Because of course it does. This is the worst sketch ever of a perp. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They found the guy. This is Sophie's super happy dog story of the week.
This dog is so precious and deserves the world. I'm just not drinking that beer.
Here's my dog. This is Onyx.
Yeah, I would just say that he's exotic because he's not your traditional dog. Still 12 out of 10 because they're all good.
Well, if that made you happy, just wait till you see the best thing ever of the week. There is a woman who moves like a horse.
Why do I want to go home and like try this?
We're actually going to show you the running butthole challenge right now. What's happening? No, that's just wrong. Every way. And we'll see you next time.
Hey, Dave. As you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Conversation. I'm Francesca Fiorentini, and so excited to speak with our next guest. He is the former director of the Democratic Party of Georgia, a talk show host, and the host of the Rashad Ritchie Morning Show, editor-at-large of Rolling Out magazine, and his name is Rashad Ritchie. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. You are in Atlanta, am I correct about that?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So I was born in a place called Albany, Georgia, but I've been in Atlanta since I was like 10 years old. So I'm definitely an Atlantan.
Okay, good. That's all I need to know from this next series of questions, all about Georgia. The holdout of blue in a sea of Southern red this election, pretty much the story, I would say, of the 2020 election beyond coronavirus, et cetera, and Trump himself. Trump has just lost Georgia for like the third time after results have been yet again certified, showing that he did in fact lose that state. What are your thoughts just going through what Georgia means for the country and the fact that it did turn blue after so many years?
Yeah, not only did Trump lose Georgia, he lost Georgia basically for Loeffler, Senator Loeffler and Senator Perdue. These were incumbent US senators. You know how rare it is for an incumbent US senator to lose their state? So they're not defeated, but they're in a runoff. They could not get 50% plus one. They're both in a runoff. But here's what it means. It means that for a Democrat running for president, number one, there's a new route to be president of the United States. Joe Biden has proven that Georgia is in play. Georgia became a de facto battleground state, really, was Stacey Abrams before she ran and when she ran. Remember, Stacey Abrams' campaign meant that a black female in a southern state could damn near become governor. But she did engage in a lot of direct voter engagement before she did her historic run. She engaged through voter registration. And we see that those elements, grassroots campaigning, it works. It has always been the Democratic stronghold. They need to continue doing it.
And was that some of the strategy that you were trying to lead them to when you were working with the Democratic Party in the state? And I mean, I feel like this is the lesson we've all learned from it. And yet Democrats often will be like, no, we've got these other consultants and they're gonna tell us what to do. Meanwhile, the grassroots is like, no, we know.
Let me tell you something. I had a lot of frustration and a lot of joy being the director and chief strategist for the Georgia Democratic Party during the years I was there. But I would jokingly tell my friends, 50% of my time I'm fighting Republicans, the other 50% I'm fighting Democrats, right? So there was always this sentiment in the state that I disagreed with and I fought against the ideology. And it was that somehow a Democrat could only win the state of Georgia if they ran to the middle. Okay, Stacey Abrams proved that model to be wrong. Before Stacey Abrams ran for governor, we had a guy named Jason Carter. Jason Carter, state senator, lawyer, very charismatic young guy, remarkable individual. He's the grandson of President Jimmy Carter. He ran, he gets the nomination, he goes to the middle once he gets the nomination. Well, he got close, but Stacey Abrams got closer, and she was a black female. She got closer because she actually excited the base and she ran toward the progressive wing of the party rather than away from it.
I was there the night that she didn't concede, and rightfully so, because of how much voter suppression there was, and Kemp running his own election. And the energy in that room, it was clear that even just a few short years later that something big was gonna happen in Georgia. Now you got Republicans running scared, okay? Loeffler and Perdue, like you said, they have to go to runoffs in January. What are your thoughts on the prospect of them winning that? What has to happen for them to lose that, for Democrats to take those seats?
Well, let me tell you this, these cats are imploding, Loeffler and Perdue. Their first action was to call for the mandated resignation of the Secretary of State of Georgia, who's Raffensperger. He's the chief elections officer. They provided no proof, no evidence that some massive voter fraud took place. Only the fact that they did not win. And you have to imagine, well, are you telling him to resign because he didn't do something to make you win? Because obviously there was nothing else they could go on. But here's what's happening. In Georgia, there's a real opportunity here for them to win, for the Democrats to win both US Senate seats. Here's why. Perdue and Loeffler, as a campaign strategy, decided not to run on policy. They decided not to run on accomplishment nor achievement in the US Senate. They ran squarely on the fact that they voted 100% with Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump is a lame duck president. He's the lamest duck president we've ever had. This guy is sitting in a room locked in four corners, basically tweeting to the rest of the world, and he's not even coming out to excite the base. Right. Who do we have here in Georgia a few days ago? Mike Pence. Nobody gives a damn about Mike Pence in the Republican Party, but he's the guy they sent because Trump refuses to come out and stump for these individuals. As a matter of fact, during the last rally, Loeffler and Perdue completely left Trump's name out of their speeches.
Wow.
100%. That is going to severely weaken them in a runoff. And we know runoffs are all about base turnout.
Sure, absolutely. And I think just building on what already happened for Democrats in this election could go a long way, right? In terms of riding them and seeing if, the entire Senate, really, the entire country is staring at Georgia and waiting on bated breath to see what happens. But I wanna turn to a Biden administration and generally your thoughts on particularly the idea that they really have to go big. We're in the middle of a bunch of crises right now, and it seems like Democrats are starting to understand that they need to really deliver for the American people. Otherwise, we're gonna have another Trump, if not Trump himself, run in 4 years and potentially win again, right? What are your thoughts on that going big? And I guess specifically when it comes to something like criminal justice reform, racial justice, and everything that 2020 has been about, which is demanding reining in police somehow.
Yeah, they got to go big or go home. Okay, that's what has to happen now. I had the great opportunity to have Senator Cory Booker as my co-host on my radio show on election day. All right, so we're talking about what should happen, what may happen, but I made it very clear to Senator Booker, if you all get this opportunity, right, to where you have Joe Biden, you have Senator Harris, and you may actually be able to control the Senate, right?
Yeah.
If you get this opportunity, you have to take advantage of it immediately. You cannot wait for a consensus from Republicans or moderates. You have to do what you need to do within the first few days of that mandate. And if the Biden-Harris campaign learned anything, I hope they learned from the Obama era that you cannot simply wait and hope for good gestures to come from the Republicans and hope that somehow they start seeing things the way you see them. You have to get in and do it quickly. I'm looking at not only criminal justice reform, reimagined policing, as well as the conversation of reparations. Remember, Senator Harris is the co-sponsor to Senate Bill 1083, which is the mirror version of House Resolution 40. That's your reparations study bill. Those things need to be on the table. Higher education access. We have to do massive social reform as it relates to these items, and it has to be done, in my opinion, within the first year of this administration.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that even just we remember this is an exploratory discussion of reparations. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it is so important because we don't even know our own history, right? Clearly, we don't know our history. We've got 71 million people still voting for a racist like Donald Trump. Where do you feel like this energy goes from the Black Lives Matter movement, knowing that it is gonna be an uphill battle to actually get Republicans or Democrats to deliver? What are your thoughts on like the people who've been galvanized and who've been politicized by just this moment, who may be disillusioned going forward?
Black Lives Matter should receive so much credit for saving this country. And here's why. They successfully did something that the media could not do. They successfully did something that Democrats could not do. And that was to polarize Trump as the man he actually is. They did what I call contrast politics. The media tried to do it. Democrats made a valiant attempt, but they could not bring it home. They did. They created a contrast conversation as it relates to the president and the direction of this country. Here's what has to happen. And I've been protesting with Black Lives Matter for years. They have to now go from protest to policy. This has to be a policy discussion. And when I say policy discussion, we're not talking about a bullet point or an executive order. We're talking about sweeping legislation that's very difficult to erase from the history books. And that has to now become the focus.
Absolutely. I talked about on a podcast of mine, quick plug for the Bitchuation Room, but LBJ was not a non-racist guy, and he signed the Civil Rights Act because of the amount of pressure.
They made him.
Yes. Yes. So even someone like Biden, who absolutely was definitely not progressive's first choice, can be pressured to do the right thing. Rashad Ritchie, any final words of or thoughts after this election?
For everyone, don't let up. Even though there's a victory celebration across this country, more than 80 million people voted for the Biden-Harris ticket. We still have to hold the powerful accountable.
Absolutely. Rashad, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure everyone to listen to his show, the Rashad Ritchie Morning Show, and also check out Rolling Out Magazine. And of course, he's been on the Damage Report, such a friend of TYT. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then they did dumps. They call them dumps, big, massive dumps.
Welcome to this special meeting of Orange County Board of Supervisors.
Hi, my name is Julie. There's no lawful reason for us to have this state of emergency.
You're wrong.
And I'm asking for it to end now. I live near 2 hospitals. I would hear about 3 sirens a month. The day of this shutdown, I would hear 5 sirens a day. This is not COVID patients.
Squirrel.
These are people having anxiety attacks. We're not saving lives by staying home. We are trading lives. And this is not fair to the people who are healthy.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur and Kasparian with you guys. So we got a big show ahead. Arizona and Wisconsin have certified. We've got updates for you guys, and the Republicans go to war against themselves. That's an awesome story. Actually, it's 2 to 3 awesome stories. The donor story is great. The Charlie Kirk story is great. That's all coming up in a little bit. You know what else is great? I just found out just a minute ago that shoptyrt.com is doing a 25% off sale site-wide. Gone. It's apparently Cyber Monday. So I need you to panic. Go get those You're Fired t-shirts because we've now fired Trump about 28 different times. No, if you included the court cases, nearly 40 different times. 25% off, everybody. And you got to use the promo code Treat Yourself. Treat Yourself. Okay. Okay. How's that not
Dear
fun?
God, you're so. Oh, Cenk. It's fun for us. I don't know if it's fun for you.
No, it is, because first of all, I'm the king of misunderstandings, right? Like, so I say treat yourself, not because that's how I talk, but because otherwise people aren't gonna know how to spell it, right? But people will take, Cenk Boomer, loves Neera Tanden, and I can go on and on, right? Thanks to DNC was great in 2016. Like, so we're gonna do the Neera Tanden story today as well.
I can't wait. But let me just preface it by saying Cenk tweeted something it was sarcasm, right? And sarcasm doesn't go over well on Twitter because everyone on Twitter automatically assumes the worst in people. Oh, yeah. So it was just funny to read your tweet and like, I know you so well. I read it and I'm like, oh, he's being sarcastic. He's kind of being, a D here. But I got tweets from people, in the liberal blogosphere, for lack of a better phrase, and they're just like, "Is he being serious here?" And I'm like, "I don't think so." But we'll talk about it in more detail.
Yeah, and look, that's part of the theme of today, but it'll be a giant theme of the next 4 years, which is this enormous disconnect between the left and establishment Democrats. The left is expecting Che Guevara, and Joe Biden's gonna deliver Strom Thurmond, right? And so I'm being too mean by saying Strom Thurmond, but that's a guy he agreed with on non-racist policies and some racist policies. Anyway, but put aside race. No, Biden's gonna give you, here, let's go with this one, Bob Dole. And the difference between Che Guevara and Bob Dole is gigantic. And so I think that's gonna lead to a huge explosion. So anyways, let's get going because there's so many great stories.
Yeah, so I thought, we have some pretty serious stories to get to, but let's start off with a little bit of fun, a quick story on Melania and Christmas. So every year, the First Lady does this obligatory tour of the White House and the premises in order to, or the area just to show what the Christmas decorations are that year. I mean, never mind the fact that it's, in my opinion, kind of insulting to basically force the First Lady to do this every year. But anyway, here's Melania Trump. You see the video, it comes out. She's not talking or anything. She's just like walking around the White House, pretending like she doesn't know she's being filmed with a smile on her face as she's looking at the superfluous amount of trees in the White House. And the decor is fine. I mean, it's certainly better than what she did with the White House Rose Garden, besides which we all know that she did nothing. Some interior designers or decorators went to the White House, they did all the decorating, and then she shot this incredibly cheesy video. But again, let me just reiterate, I don't think that the First Lady should feel any pressure or any obligation to engage in this. I personally love interior design, and I feel like if I were the First Lady, I would, and officials came to me and said, Madam First Lady, you must now show off your decorating skills or your cooking skills or anything like that. I'd be like, actually, that sounds kind of fun. But I shouldn't feel obligated, neither should Melania, neither should any First Lady. Now that I got that out of the way, I thought that it was important to show you guys the version that most people didn't get to see, the version where Melania Trump actually shared her real thoughts about Christmas and a litany of other political issues that the Trump administration has gotten heat for. Let's watch.
They say I'm complicit. I'm the same like him. I support him. I don't say enough. I don't do enough. No. Where I am, I'm working like my ass. I know. Christmas stuff that, who gives a about Christmas stuff and decoration, but I need to do it, right? Yeah, but then I do it, and I say that I'm working on Christmas, planning for the Christmas, and they said, oh, what about the children? They were separated. Give me a break.
Okay, so
I guess the White House needed to get rid of that version. A little too harsh, a little too honest for the American people.
Yeah, so that's leaked tape of Melania that we, of course, put over the new footage. So let me be clear on a couple of things. I don't think it's a little insulting to have the First Lady do all this decoration nonsense. I think it's massively insulting. So let's say my wife became president of the United States, and they say, okay, Jake, now you have to do Christmas decorations. Get the out of here. No, I'm not gonna. I have a whole different job. I mean, Melania doesn't have a job. She was a model before. But it doesn't matter. It's still insulting to her. It's whether it's a wife or a husband who has a completely different job or no job, for them to say, okay, now be the maid where you go around decorating the house. No, it's ridiculous. Right. They should completely end that practice.
But the only difference is, Cenk, I mean, we haven't had this scenario yet, but if you were the first man, right? Like assuming your wife got elected as president, you were the first man, they wouldn't ask you to do Christmas decorations. They wouldn't ask you to remodel the White House Rose Garden. They would come up with some other gender specific task, right? So it would be like, I don't know, the first man hunting day or something like that, right? Like I just can't imagine them continuing that tradition if it were a man who were the spouse of the person who got elected 100%, as president.
100%.
But who knows?
Maybe no, 100%. Although the Democrats would. They'd have the guy dress in an apron and make a fool out of himself and all that stuff, right? But the Republicans would never do that because it's bad optics. And Democrats don't understand optics. They smear optics all over themselves. But look at all the assumptions that the media has. Why is the media continuing this farce that people like Melania Trump have to care about Christmas decorations? And so, look, I don't agree with her on Christmas. She apparently hates it. I don't know if she started the war on Christmas or if she's just a soldier in the war on Christmas. I love Christmas, with one exception, the tree of horrors that we saw in that video. What was that? Like, okay, one Christmas tree I love. We got our Christmas tree over the weekend. Nobody in the house is religious, but we love the American tradition of Christmas, right? Having nothing to do with religion. But look, what is that thing, man? I'm waiting for it to jump out of between one of those trees. It's a bit much, right?
Well, I think Trump just needs a change of scenery, Cenk. I mean, he's getting tired of hiding in a bunker, and now he wants to hide in a forest full of Christmas trees. And Melania provided that for him.
There's an excellent chance that you would see Trump jump out of one of those trees. And for a minute, you might confuse him for the Lorax. But no, he actually is against the trees. So orange either way though. All right, just a fun little story, but really for any new administration, and the Bidens will definitely go along with this nonsense. But please, the media, it's the year 2020. Don't put these really insipid, ridiculous gender assumptions on the First Lady and all the mythology, all of it. Like, oh my God, they care so much about Christmas. They care so much. And then you find the leak takes they hate Christmas. Like, why are you guys all pretending and helping with some weirdo, antiquated marketing? Why don't you report the truth for a change?
Yeah, well, we like to report the truth. So we now switch gears from a fun story to a super serious story involving foreign policy. Some pretty big updates on tensions between the United States, Israel, and Iran. So Iran's top nuclear scientist was assassinated over the weekend in what was originally reported as an ambush-style attack over the Thanksgiving weekend. Now, there have been some conflicting reports on how this scientist was assassinated, but what we do know for a fact was that he was targeted, he was murdered, and it was brutal. He didn't survive, and there were, politicians both in the United States and in the government of Israel who certainly wanted to target him because they believed that he was the top scientist behind developing Iran's nuclear program. Now, I want to be clear and state this caveat from the very beginning. Iran has consistently denied that they've been developing nuclear weapons. The Iran nuclear nuclear deal, which was signed by Barack Obama, European countries, and Iran, had certain safeguards in place to ensure that Iran was not enriching uranium and was not developing nuclear weapons. Donald Trump pulled out of that nuclear deal, which essentially opened the path, paved the way for Iran to continue enriching uranium. However, even though they're doing that, they still stand by their previous statements that they are not enriching uranium for nuclear weapons. So that's context that's important to know, some background. Now let's get to what happened over the weekend. So the nuclear scientist that I'm referring to, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, was or has been considered the driving force behind Iran's nuclear weapons program for 2 decades. Gunmen waited along the road and attacked him as his car was driving through the countryside town of Abzard in the Demavand region, according to official Iranian media and state television. The state media account said that he had been gravely wounded in the attack and that doctors tried to save him in the hospital but could not. Now, again, I want to reiterate that there are some conflicting reports as to how this attack happened. Originally, there were reports of a bomb. Then there were reports of gunmen, possibly as many as 12 assassins armed with assault weapons who were able to escape the scene. The Fars news agency, which is close to Iran's Revolutionary Guard, reported that no attackers were present and that the perpetrators instead used a remote-controlled machine gun. Iran's English language press TV added that a weapon with an Israeli logo was located at the scene. So now we get to the point where there's some speculation as to who the perpetrators are. However, while the Israeli government is so far denying that they orchestrated this assassination, the Israeli government has assassinated other scientists in Iran previously, and Iran is saying that they're finding weapons with Israeli logos on it. So I'll give you more evidence as to why there's a lot of speculation regarding Israel's involvement here. Now, one American official who spoke to the New York Times, along with 2 other intelligence officials, said that Israel was behind the attack on the scientist. It was unclear how much the United States may have known about the operation in advance. But as we know, the United States and Israel are 2 close allies that have long shared intelligence regarding Iran. The White House and the CIA have declined to comment on this story. And I do want to go to a journalist who covers this topic, who I personally trust. She's an Iranian journalist, Iranian-American journalist, I should say, Negar Mortazavi, who has been on the Young Turks before. But she spoke to Democracy Now! About some of the motivations behind this assassination, and she shares some of her analysis as well. Let's take a quick look at what she has to say.
This is not the first nuclear scientist in Iran being assassinated. Israel has always denied involvement, but it's really the only country with both the motivation and the capability to conduct such attacks. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh was a top person in the nuclear and defense infrastructure of Iran. He was well guarded. The country knew that he was a target. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli prime minister, had named him 2 years ago in a presentation. He said, remember this name, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. So the security services knew that he would be a potential target for the Israelis. He was well guarded. And the fact that this operation was successfully launched, it was first said that there was an ambush. Now there's talks of an automatic weapon. We're still not sure how exactly it unfolded, but it was successful and he's dead now. It's just a blow to Iran's security system. And it's also, I believe, it's a political move to first try to provoke Iran into a violent retaliation and basically pull Iran into a wider military conflict with the United States, and then also complicate future negotiations between Tehran and Washington when President-elect Biden enters office, which I think this will complicate those future negotiations.
So Cenk, she's absolutely right. Immediately after this incident happened, it was reported that Iran buries slain nuclear scientists, leaders vow revenge and no negotiations with the West. And as we know, Biden had committed to renegotiating the Iran nuclear deal, and this definitely does complicate the matter. And Iran is much less likely to want to negotiate with the United States, considering what its ally allegedly did here.
All right, so first of all, let's put some context to some of the claims by the governments. So when Iran says it was very likely Israel who did it, and then Israel goes, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. That means it's Israel, okay? So do I know it definitively? Of course not. That's why we couch it in all these terms of allegations, etc. But if Israel didn't do something, they're not shy about it. They'll tell you. And Israel has assassinated Iranian scientists before. About a decade ago, they assassinated a couple of them, including one in front of their kid's school. They drove up and murdered him right in front of his kids. And so those are acts of terrorism. There's no question about it. And now even some of the former top intelligence officials in America say it's acts of terrorism. And then of course, if Iran retaliates, they'll pretend to be shocked and chagrined. They'll pretend it was the first thing that ever happened in this conflict. And they'll say, you see these barbaric Muslims. You see how barbaric they are. They're gonna go around killing people like this. They're terrorists, right? Now the reality is, if terrorism has any meaning at all, and as is likely, Netanyahu ordered this assassination, that makes Netanyahu a terrorist. Now that's by definition. So if you want to cry about that definition, that's up to you guys. If you want to say, hey, I don't care about the definition, this guy is clearly a civilian, and you say, well, I think he's unofficially working with the government. I hear you on that. He probably is. He's got an SUV. He's got bodyguards. Well, he's a physicist with that. So I'm not saying he wasn't working on whatever version of a nuclear program they have for nuclear energy, or eventually maybe one day nuclear weapons. But guys, if we say, okay, that's not terrorism, then Iran gets to say, all right, then I'm gonna go around murdering American scientists, and I'm gonna go around murdering Israeli scientists, and that's not terrorism either. Then you can't turn around in principle and say, no, when you do the same exact thing, by the way, in retaliation to our original act, the same exact thing as we did, we're gonna call you a dirty, terrible, horrible, barbaric terrorist. But we, of course, are beloved and cherished. When we murder you, it's with great intent. No, that doesn't make any sense at all. You either have the definition of terrorism or you don't. And so if-
Right, and sorry, Cenk, I wanted to comment on that because you're absolutely right. I mean, just to make it personal so people understand just how serious this really is. He was a civilian, right? Imagine if Iran decided to assassinate the top scientist working at Raytheon, right?
Oh, we'd lose it. We'd invade them.
Of course, terrorism.
We'd invade.
Of course, exactly.
Of course. So guys, anyone, any right winger, or if there are some unreal conservative Democrats, there's a lot of them unfortunately, thinks, oh yeah, it's so cool to murder their scientists. That's not terrorism because we did it and we're the good guys. Good guys assassinate people in front of their kids. That's such a good guy thing to do. And so if you think that, and then they kill our guys, I guess, I don't know. I guess the right wingers, they don't care about principles. We keep trying to talk to them about logic and facts and principles. And I gotta get used to the fact that they just don't talk the same language as we do. They don't have the same brain as we do. They think murdering them is a great idea. If they ever retaliate, they think it's the most monstrous thing they've ever seen. Why? Well, they're Muslims, so they're terrible guys. Whereas we're the Judeo-Christian heritage. So when we murder people, it's such a wonderful, benighted thing, and God loves us for it. So yeah, if you're a conservative, you're that kind of hypocrite, I'm never gonna be able to convince you anyway. But in terms of our government, look, this gets to issue number 2. Trump, a couple of weeks ago, was considering bombing Iran. He got talked out of it, even by crazed neocons like Mike Pompeo. They were like, that's a really bad idea. All of our generals are like, that's a bad idea. That's gonna start a war. And I know you want to screw over Biden, but that war is going to kill a lot of Americans, and we're not prepared. There's a right way to start illegal wars like we did in Iraq, and a wrong way, and blundering into one is not a good idea. So Israel comes along, it appears based on the reporting, and goes, how about we start it for you and then you fight it for us? And then Trump apparently goes, great, wonderful. Okay, you guys start a war, you guys do terrorism, we don't mind at all. And then afterwards, we'll try to create such a giant mess that a lot of American boys and girls will go over there and get killed cleaning up your mess. So that's a great idea. Remember, Trump is anti-war. Hilarious. No, as long as there's only one guiding principle of Trump, and that's Trump. So on his way out, he thinks it's a great idea to start an endless conflict in the Middle East by constantly murdering Iranian officials or sanctioning their murder so that they'll retaliate, and then he'll go, I ruined another good deal. This way they'll develop more nuclear energy. Since he destroyed that deal, which had gotten all the uranium out of Iran, Iran has now gone back to stockpiling uranium. Why? Because we broke the deal. So now they're saying, okay, well then I'm gonna develop uranium. And so, oh yeah, well then we'll become the terrorists and we'll start murdering your civilians. Okay, that's not the country I signed up for. America's gotta be way better than this. And I don't know why another country, I don't care who it is, if it's the UAE in this case, who also hates Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE loves Israel. Their leadership at least does.
Yeah.
UAE, which hates Iran, Saudi Arabia, which hates Iran, or Israel, which hates Iran. If any of those right-wing governments, and by the way, it's not all the people, it's not the countries, it's their right-wing leaders who want to start that war. I don't know who Trump is taking orders from, but none of them are Americans, and we shouldn't be taking orders from any foreign government, especially when they say, hey, by the way, we're gonna commit an act of terrorism, and then you're gonna be held partially responsible. No deal.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I do wanna give some credit to the various groups of people, individuals as well, who have condemned this attack. So the international community is absolutely against what happened, including the European Union, the United Nations, they've all condemned this. But former CIA Director John Brennan also condemned this assassination, writing the following: "This was a criminal act and highly reckless. It risks lethal retaliation and a new round of regional conflict. Iranian leaders would be wise to wait for the return of responsible American leadership on the global stage and to resist the urge to respond against perceived culprits. I do not know whether a foreign government authorized or carried out the murder of the scientist, Fakhrizadeh. Such an act of state-sponsored terrorism would be a flagrant violation of international law and encourage more governments to carry out lethal attacks against foreign officials." So this was certainly a reckless act. And for the Israeli government to argue that they engage in these types of aggressive actions in order to protect their own national security, understand that Israel did not want any negotiations in the Iran nuclear deal. They did not want Obama to make that deal with Iran, and they were very celebratory once Donald Trump ripped up that nuclear deal, which again paved the way for Iran to continue, enriching uranium. And Israel argues, well, it didn't do enough when it came to missiles. Yeah, but it's the Iran nuclear deal. It's about nuclear power, right? What everyone in the international community that considers themselves allies with Israel and the United States claim they're concerned about. If you want to negotiate a different deal regarding missiles, then negotiate another deal. But ripping up the Iran nuclear deal has only destabilized this situation. It has only escalated tensions. And Donald Trump, by the way, has also increased tensions with Iran right before this assassination happened. He decided to go after the international community for continuing to do any trade with Iran during COVID, because remember, he ripped up the Iran nuclear deal and then implemented sanctions and then beefed up those sanctions further. So while China continues to do some trade with Iran, the Trump administration is threatening to retaliate against China for doing so, right? But China responded with, but Iran was following the nuclear deal. It was the United States who decided to rip it up and not follow through with their promises. They're the ones who reneged. So why should we punish Iran for that? And I think that if you want to have the moral high ground, China in this case does have the moral high ground.
All right, let me say one last thing here. Look, two last things. First, I got no love for the Iranian government. I think that the Grand Ayatollah is a farce. I think that they should go to an actual democracy. And so I can't stand their fundamentalist version of Islam and the way that they oppress their own people. I don't believe them either when they say things like it was an automatic machine gun. Yeah, that's convenient. You probably let 12 assassins get out of your country with not one of them even being injured. You look like idiots. So then you go, oh no, yeah, it was an automatic machine gun. Yeah, that's why we didn't let anybody escape. No, we're really brilliant. So I don't believe them either, right? But when we go assassinate their scientists, do you think that hurts the religious government in Iran, or do you think that helps them? You schmucks, it helps them. It helps them stay in power because now they've got a boogeyman that they fight against. In this case, it's real. And they say, oh, now Iranians all rally because here was a civilian scientist, one of the most educated, one of the smartest guys in Iran, and they murdered him right in front of your eyes. Now you got to all rally around the flag. And so the right wing, it's not that, look, Trump's an idiot, but Netanyahu isn't. You think Netanyahu doesn't know that? He knows that. But he thinks, good, that way we'll be entrenched in more and more bloody wars. And that way I'll have more power. And by the way, you know who's most affected by this and who should be most concerned right now? Israeli scientists. He just endangered all of their lives. Who's Iran most likely to strike back at? Israeli scientists. Do you think they're going to be able to get to the top nuclear physicists in Israel? My guess is no. So they'll kill a couple of random scientists for no reason. Why? Well, to be fair to them, not for no reason, because their scientist was killed. So those poor guys who get killed, they didn't have anything to do with this. Netanyahu offered them up as a sacrifice so that he can get more wars and maybe, just maybe, hold on to power, because he's supposed to leave in a power sharing deal that they have. But he's thinking, maybe if I start a bloody war that gets more Israelis killed, they'll have to rally around the flag. The Iranians will rally around the flag. Their government that hates us and hates our citizens will be more entrenched, yes, because that means we'll have more war and my bloody hands will get to stay in charge. That's Netanyahu's play. We should have nothing to do with it. So if they strike back against Israel, I don't care if it was Canada, UK, or any other ally. Why? Why would you say, hey, that's your problem, man? You went and did an act of terrorism, your stupid right-wing government did. You should remove them from office immediately, as we just removed our right-wing government. And so don't do the terrorism in the first place. So I'm only telling you that not because I wouldn't be broken up about it. I just told you those poor people who are gonna die because of this. It wasn't their fault at all. And I hope to God that no one dies, but likely they will, because that's what happens when you start conflicts like this. But at the end of the day, if they say, hey, you know what? No, Iran struck back against Israel. Now, America, you have to go and fight our war. America, you have to send your sons and your daughters to go die on behalf of Netanyahu, who committed this act of terrorism to start the war in the first place. No deal, no deal. We're not going, we're not going. You want to do acts of terrorism, you back it up.
All right, a reminder of why Neera Tanden is an absolutely disastrous choice to serve in Biden's cabinet when we come back from the break. All right, we're back. We're back for our live online audience. Cenk's gonna read some member comments and some live reads, so go ahead, Cenk.
Yeah, guys, we're doing something different today. So for all of our 24-hour platforms, they're gone already. They're listening to commercials. But if you're watching this, you're on YouTube, Twitch, or the other platforms that allow for this. So we decided we're gonna take the 4 minutes. We're gonna play around with it. So like, don't get mad at us if tomorrow we don't do the 4 minutes in each break, right? But we're gonna try to read some of your comments, and this is the part is much more informal because normally I get to absorb all your comments before I read them back to you. Here, it'll go a little bit quicker than that. And so anyway, in fact, I don't know how I'm gonna read all these. But Brett, and I'll talk to our producer and Anna will too, Brett, every once in a while during these breaks. So Brett, can you, I don't know if you've got the thermometer ready, but if you do, let's put that up for tyt.com/go, because this is the last day in November. And so we were trying to get to 200,000, 146,595. Can we at least get to 150? That would be amazing, guys. If you could help in any way, that would be great. tyt.com/go. FinFan33 wrote on Super Chat, I want that Be Best ornament. Yeah, I forgot to note that. That's a great point. I mean, they have a Be Best ornament on the Christmas tree. Trump is the biggest bully in social media. I mean, it's absurd. It's absurd. Luke Murphy writes in on Super Chat, you guys inspire me to run and win in my city council race, trying to be #too strong at the local level. I love that, Luke. Way to run, way to get in a fight, and way to win. That's amazing. So now let me read some new subs on Twitch. Tails420 gifted 10 subs, so Tails, thank you so much. Trimu Batiki did 5 months at tier 3, so that's awesome, thank you. Not My Baby did 2 months, one with, or did it with Prime. If you have Amazon Prime on Twitch, it's free for you guys to subscribe to us, but we get the revenue anyway. It's a great deal for everyone involved, so please try that. Why Not Octavius, 4 months at tier 1. Monique, 3 gifted subs. Luke H, 5 months with Prime. Azazel, 6 months tier 1. AOC 202X, 7 months tier 2. Awesome. Thunder Voice, 7 months tier 1, who gives an F about Christmas, they wrote in. I happen to like the holiday, but I hear you on the pomp and circumstance, which I covered earlier, obviously. Angie Pepper says, got 3 months with Prime and says, love TYT. Gone in Paradise did 5 months with Prime and said, been watching since Current TV, love you guys. Current TV was back in 2012, 2013, so bless your heart, you've been with us for a long, long time. So now the members section, as I read this as quickly as I can. Yeah, Jank Flexing Tricep says, imagine if Hillary had won in 2016. Would they ask Bill Clinton to put up the Christmas decorations? That's exactly right. It's so absurd. Okay, interesting. Antifa Hamburglar says, you guys are being overly woke. It's not insulting, it's just a tradition. As a woman decorating the White House for Christmas with unlimited funds would be a dream come true, but if she doesn't want to do it, let someone else. And last one is.
Yeah, but the point is, you guys, the point is, just please understand, the point is that it's expected of the First Lady. That's what makes it insulting, right? If she did it on her own, then that's different. All right, we need to come back to the main show.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Jake and Anna with you guys. So a couple of shout outs to our sponsors. PureVPN is having a deal. It's 88% off a 5-year plan. So you got to protect your computer. Try tyt.com/purevpn. And one more here, Samsung has a new app. Obviously you can take it anywhere you want. So Samsung TV has all these different channels, including the Young Turks as a 24-hour channel. Some of you might be watching it right now. So these are exclusively on Samsung Galaxy devices. It's free TV, there's no strings attached. You could download it at tyt.com/Samsung TV. And by the way, TYT is on channel 1032. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right, well, Joe Biden is likely to name Neera Tanden as the head of the Office of Management and Budget, which is terrifying if you know anything about Neera Tanden and how hostile she is toward progressives and any member, left member of the Democratic Party. Now, one of the things that we should really be looking out for is her views on austerity. And back in 2010, when the Obama administration certainly was open to cutting funding to entitlement programs, Neera Tanden was part of that push to do so. So Neera Tanden is the president of the Center for American Progress. It is a think tank. And one thing that everyone needs to be abundantly clear on is that most think tanks, and I know I'm speaking generally here, but I think that you'll find out that I'm telling the truth, and there's evidence to this if you look at funding. Most think tanks serve as laundromats in order to launder political corruption. They're very much part and parcel of the legalized bribery system that we have set up in the United States. And that's certainly true when it comes to Neera Tanden's views on foreign policy and on austerity. So let's start off with Social Security and austerity. Biden, who has repeatedly pushed for Social Security cuts throughout his career, announced his selection of Center for American Progress President Neera Tanden as his choice to run the powerful White House Office of Management and Budget. A longtime aide to Hillary Clinton, Tanden touted her think tank's 2010 proposal to reduce Social Security benefits in 2012 as Biden was pushing for such cuts in the Obama administration. In fact, Neera Tanden felt pretty comfortable going on C-SPAN to explain why she thinks this is a great idea, cutting funding to Social Security. Watch.
There's a viewer here who wants you to take us deeper into entitlements by Twitter. Ms. Tanden, do you know what the president means when he says entitlements are on the table? Any specifics and anything you would endorse?
Yeah, I mean, so there are a range of entitlements that, I think when we're talking about entitlements, we're talking about Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid. These are programs that people receive support because of the status that they have. So when after 65, you get funding from Social Security and Medicare. Actually, it's getting older for Social Security. But the president has $300 billion in his budget in cuts in Medicare. That comes on top of cuts in Medicare from the Affordable Care Act. So he has put specific cuts in the budget already in Medicare, and they had savings in Medicaid in the past. I think the question really is, if we're gonna have a deal to address long-term deficit reduction, we need to put both entitlements on the table as well as taxes. It's unfair to ask only middle-class Americans to bear the burden of our deficits. Middle-class Americans actually didn't create the deficits. So I think the challenge is that we should have entitlements on the savings, on the entitlements, and the Center for American Progress has put forward ideas and proposals to reform the beneficiary structure of Social Security. Some of our progressive allies aren't as excited about that as we are, but we've put those ideas on the table. But we think that those are legitimate ideas that need to be put part of a proposal where everyone's at the table.
So again, let me just remind everyone, this is back in 2010 when there is this incoming, or at this point they're already in, Republican Congress, and they're very much pretending to be concerned about deficits, and so they're putting themselves in this position of allegedly being deficit hawks. I think it's abundantly clear now that they've never been deficit hawks. They have no problem with overspending, especially during Republican administrations. Look at how much spending is happening under the Trump administration, in addition to tax cuts. And so what Neera Tanden was saying there was, no, we should raise taxes, sure, but really we need to also consider cutting funding to these entitlements like Social Security. And Cenk, if I may, I just want to quickly explain how the Center for American Progress proposed to do that. This is according to the Daily Poster, David Sirota's publication, and Walter Bragman writes the following: Tanden's Social Security push followed the 2010 midterms. During the deficit reduction negotiations between the Obama administration and the new GOP Congress, Republicans drew a hard line, but Obama sought a middle ground. Of course he did. Central to the administration's efforts, which were led by Biden, was a plan called the chained CPI that would have slowed the rate at which Social Security benefits increase over time. In a report on Social Security solvency, the Center for American Progress, again, this is Neera Tanden's think tank, released 2 years earlier. The organization cautioned that Social Security is showing its age and warned that progressive ideas like lifting the payroll tax without addressing other problems in Social Security's benefit design would be a mistake. One of the solutions it proposed was the chained CPI. Cenk.
Okay. So I had some tweets about this that folks want me to clarify, and I'm happy to do that. So let me give context first. So in that 2012 clip that we just showed you, if your blood is boiling over Social Security and Medicare proposed cuts by Democrats, number one, it should be. Number two, you have to understand that back in 2012, that was considered the most normal thing in the world. And that is why we had a progressive rebellion in the first place, because we're sick of it. But at the time, the mainstream media would tell you, oh no, cutting Social Security on behalf of Republicans is a great idea, a wonderful, wonderful idea by Democrats. So Neera Tanden didn't think she was saying anything controversial there. So now, does it make it right? No, I just explained to you, that's why we started the rebellion in the first place, because we're sick of these corporate Democrats. So that gets to point number 2. I proposed something else on Twitter that I would want to mention here as well. That the Biden team should, and Democrats overall, should say to the Republicans, we're not going to have any conversation about cutting any social programs until we reverse every penny of the Trump tax cuts for the rich and for corporations, right? Every penny, right? And so people on Twitter, people that are on the left on Twitter, some of them got mad at that. They're like, what do you mean cutting social programs? If we do that, we should never cut social programs. I agree with you, brother. But here's what a lot of folks are not getting. It includes establishment Democrats, includes apparently people on the left, and most especially the media. We have giant, enormous, nuclear-sized disagreements within the Democratic Party. So there's no way in the world Joe Biden is going to reverse Trump's tax cuts. Some people are saying, oh, reverse Trump and Bush's tax cuts. Joe Biden is the guy who made the Bush tax cuts permanent. That was a deal with Mitch McConnell where the rich got to keep 82% of the tax cuts forever and ever and ever. Biden himself specifically did that deal. Michael Bennett wrote a whole book about that deal. That was Biden who gave away the farm to make the Bush tax cuts permanent. He's not gonna undo his own work. That's fantasy land, it's never gonna happen. And in terms of the Trump tax cuts for corporations, people like Biden say, oh, no, we gotta bring some of that back. It used to be 35%. The idea was we're gonna lower it to 21, which is already outrageous, but we're gonna take away the loopholes. Well, they didn't take away any of the loopholes. They lowered it to 21, now Biden and a lot of Democrats are like, maybe we raise it back up to 25 or 30. No, raise it to 35 where it was. But Biden will do none of that. And meanwhile, the left thinks, oh, okay, we got Che Guevara in here and he's gonna undo all the Trump and Bush tax cuts. Well, prepare to be massively, massively disappointed. And so will the Biden administration likely propose cutting social programs before they undo most of the tax cuts, let alone all of the tax cuts? Definitely. It would be shocking if they didn't. So now comes Neera Tanden into this equation. The OMB is very, very important.
Wait, Cenk.
Yeah.
Before you jump in, sorry to interrupt you, but like I have to respond to some of it. I think that your characterization of what the left wants is a mischaracterization. I think that you're going to an extreme and simply, by the way, putting that on the table, like I'm surprised that that's a negotiation you would be interested in, right? Simply rolling back the Trump era tax cuts and agreeing to cut these programs puts us in a far worse position than we were in.
I'm not agreeing to cut those programs, Anna. No, please. Like, I guess I'm not doing a good job of communicating here, ironic. Okay, I don't want to cut those programs. We should definitely not cut those programs. The reason I point that out in a rhetorical way is so that the very slow people in the mainstream media go, oh, well, okay, that's a request that seems to be at least halfway of the road. And if Biden team can't even come halfway down the road, then the Biden team is being unreasonable. If you just go in there and say, I want all the Bush and Trump tax cuts reversed, the media is gonna go, oh no, these guys are crazy, we're done with them. Okay, so how much Social Security and Medicare do you wanna cut? Because it's perfectly reasonable to cut that. I'm trying to break through to the media that is constantly framing things wrong. So when the left goes, no, okay, we're gonna ask for the moon in the sky. Okay, but guys, are we gonna actually try to get something done? Are we gonna try to make sure that Biden at least tries to roll back some of those tax cuts? Because if you don't create realistic pressure, you'll get zero results, zero. And if you say, hey, I don't care about results, it's unrealistic anyway, let's just go nuclear on day one. Okay, it's actually not an unreasonable strategy given my sense of what the Biden team will do. But what I wanna do is first, let them take the first shots. Okay, then we could respond. But if you say, no, I don't care about the media, I don't care about anything, but we lost in 2020 because we didn't care about the media. We thought, oh, we don't need the media. Well, it turns out the media came in and lied on behalf of moderate Democrats, so they won. So we've got to fight on in a way that makes any degree of sense. So that gets to my tweet. So when Neera was appointed here, and I don't know her personally, we've just yelled at each other on Twitter in the past. You guys interviewed her for a split second. I forget if I ever interviewed her. Anyway, Neera Tanden, as I wrote, has been waiting for this appointment for 4 unending years now. My point there is she was so desperate to get an appointment with the Hillary Clinton administration and did everything she could to help them in the 2016 primaries. So now she must be elated. I got into the Biden team anyway. Then I say all of her hard work inside the establishment paid off, and now she's in a power position to help direct the world's largest resources. Now we're going to find out who she is, and so is she, rooting for her. Now, when I said rooting for her, people lost their minds. They're like, oh my God, you love Neera Tanden, I knew it, you're a sellout shill. No. Okay, let me try to stay patient, okay? Guys, what you guys apparently don't understand is people inside the establishment, they tell themselves pretty little lies every single day. They get up in the morning, they look at themselves in the mirror and they go, no, I know I'm doing these compromises and I know that I've got all these donors at CAP and including Big Pharma, they're so solicitous of AIPAC and the list goes on and Goldman Sachs. But I'm doing that also I can get power, and when I get power, that's when I'm gonna do the right things and it's all gonna pay off. I know those guys, I know them like the back of my hand. That's what they believe in their very, very core. So what I'm doing is I'm challenging her. Okay, now you have the power. Are you actually gonna do anything good? Or are you gonna continue supporting Goldman Sachs and AIPAC and all these guys and Big Pharma? And then if you do continue supporting that, then stop telling yourself pretty little lies. It just means you've always worked for corporate America and you did it for status and privilege, and it's super sad.
Yeah, that's what she did. That's what she did, and it's not just about austerity. It also applies to her foreign policy positions. Think tanks are funded by the very same donors that fund our politicians and corrupt them. And so she actually thought it would be a good idea after the United States bombed Libya to demand that Libya hand over its oil profits to the United States for doing them this great service of bombing them and destabilizing their country. She's a disaster, and I'm sure we're gonna have more opportunities to talk about her in depth as the Biden administration begins its work. But anyway, we do have to take a break right now. We will be right back.
All right, guys, we're back for Twitch and YouTube and whoever else. On day one of trying to do this new system where we read you guys' comments and names of folks who signed up, etc., already there's an issue. I can't read any of these until I read them to you. So, okay, so I guess I'll read this one because I had read it before. HC says, totally random, Cenk. I saw your live this past weekend. You mocking Trump, saying he won is damn near the funniest thing I've ever seen. This is what independent media looks like. CNN could never. Yeah, of course, the CNN would never. I mean, like, Anderson Cooper went 1% of the way towards mocking Trump once about he said some joke about a turtle that was turned upside down or something. He came on and apologized the next day. I was dripping Trump and MAGA tears into my too strong coffee in a live. That's what he's referring to. Thank you for using Super Chat. Let me do the easy one here, which is reading out names of Twitch subs. Silver Zen, 5 months, tier 1. Troll P writes, woohoo, no commercials, love you TYT, and subbed for 6 months, thank you. Jack Beck, Laughing Cackle, Al Carnegie, Sun C64, Ron Edelmeyer, Geriatric 59, that's funny. Tiger Lily, all subbed with Prime. It's free for you guys if you have Amazon Prime on Twitch, and we get the revenue, it's awesome. And C-Dubs 1984 says, I feel so special. So thank you to everybody on Twitch and to folks on Twitter as well. I'm sorry, on YouTube using Super Chat as well. Yeah, Eric199 has a good comment here. This is from Super Chat. The political schism in America has destroyed my relationship with my father and mother. The damage will be long lasting, if not permanent. Just don't know how we can coexist with them. Well, so that's an iceberg that America has not at all reconciled with. And it's because, again, folks in the mainstream media think that this is all temporary. And that once, and Joe Biden thinks that, Democratic leadership thinks that, they're like, oh, once January 20th comes around and Trump's not in office anymore, all this will magically go away. No, it will not go away. Only 3% of Republican voters think that Joe Biden won the election fair and square. No, and they genuinely believe, you go on any social media, they genuinely believe that Trump is gonna do a ta-da and have some magic evidence and he's gonna win at the end. And so when he doesn't win, which he hasn't, nor will he, they're gonna be flabbergasted. They're not gonna understand what happened. It's already happened. They still won't agree to it. They don't. So they live in a totally different reality. So how, like, is your mom and your dad? That breaks me up, but how are you supposed to talk to them? Like, I've told you 100 times, I got an uncle who voted for Trump. How do you talk to a person who doesn't understand facts anymore? We literally don't have the language to communicate with half the country anymore. And the media and the Democrats are whistling past the graveyard here. No, these folks are gone, man. They're in zombie world. They're in total zombie world. So they think they're gonna, oh yeah, we're gonna drink your tears on January 20th when you see Trump won. All right, Fuji001 said, message received, keep up the good fight. Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna come right back here, guys. All right, so one programming note for you guys back on the Young Turks. We're gonna do a special on December 8th called Unlock the Vault. It is to talk about tyt.com/go, but it's also to show old clips. And that sounds dangerous, so come here for that at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on December 8th. And if you can, any help at tyt.com/go is super appreciated. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right, well, in the postgame today, we're gonna talk a little bit about Donald Trump's interview with Maria Bartiromo. But for now, let's also discuss some of the conned conservatives who are upset about donating money to Trump's nonsense legal battles. So, a Trump donor who provided millions, literally millions of dollars to the Trump campaign for the purpose of fighting alleged voter fraud, claims that have been unfounded, now wants his money back. He realizes that he's the one who's been dealing with fraud on behalf of the Trump campaign and realizes he's been duped. So Frederick Eshelman is the businessman in question here. He's a businessman from North Carolina, and he said he gave $2.5 million to True the Vote, which is a pro-Trump election ethics group in Texas that promised to file lawsuits in 7 swing states as part of its push to, quote, investigate, litigate, and expose suspected illegal balloting and fraud in the 2020 general election. But then all of a sudden, True the Vote actually dropped all of its legal actions and discontinued its Validate the Vote 2020 campaign. And so of course, naturally, if you've donated $2.5 million to this organization and they drop all of these actions that they were allegedly be engaged in, you'd wanna know why, you'd wanna know what the money is being used for. And it turns out that they just kind of stopped returning Eshelman's calls. So the founder of Eshelman Ventures LLC, so yes, he's a venture capitalist, said he asked regularly and repeatedly for updates, the lawsuit asserts, But his requests were consistently met with vague responses, platitudes, and empty promises. Eshelman, the former chief executive of a pharmaceutical company, claims in his lawsuit that the nonprofit offered to refund him $1 million if he would drop his plan to sue the group. He is seeking the return of the full $2.5 million that he says he wired to this organization. And so he started off with wiring $2 million, and then later he sent another $500,000 on November 13th. Now, keep in mind that the Trump campaign has literally lost or withdrew from 38 different court actions because they have absolutely no evidence of voter fraud. They're unable to prove that there's widespread voter fraud. They're unable to, basically make a case that really resonates with any of these judges. And so in a statement, the organization finally responded and said this. I love this quote. Our mission is much bigger than just one election. It is about repairing the system for all future elections. Basically, go F yourself. Thanks for the money, bro.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm here for this story. I'm glad they robbed them blind. Anyone who sends any money, let alone $2.5 million, to a group that has pro-Trump and ethics in the same sentence deserves to be robbed. Ethics. You voted for Trump ethics. You funded Trump ethics. You got Trump ethics. Congratulations, you got what you paid for. The whole point of Trump is that he's a con man who's here to rob you. So another group decided, we'll follow our role model. We'll set up camp, and our aim will be to rob idiot suckers who think that Trump is the ethical one, and we're all on the right wing, the ethical ones. We're the ethical ones. And so yes, there's terrible voter fraud. Ooh, we got our lawyers working around the clock. They're working on all the leads. So yeah, sure, that's gonna happen. And by the way, why did they drop the lawsuits? I don't know. I don't know if their intention was to never file lawsuits and just rob idiot Republican donors. More power to them if they did. I don't care if they're right wingers. It's just there's no honor among thieves, right? And number two.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I do have some details on that, Cenk, because soon after the story broke, the organization claimed that they did file lawsuits. They filed lawsuits in 4 different states, but later dropped those lawsuits, which again still doesn't explain what happened to the $2.5 million, right? Really, they spent $2.5 million on those 4 insanely short lawsuits, which they immediately dropped. I mean, it's so obvious that there's that this guy got conned. That the American people, the Republican Party, Republican voters, 68% of them think that Donald Trump had the election stolen from them, stolen from Donald Trump, I should say. And they've been conned. It's just, they've probably given, small dollar donations to the Trump campaign thinking that it's going to these legal battles, but it's not. It's going toward paying off Donald Trump's debts, which is stated in the fine print in the emails that the Trump campaign is sending out to its supporters and donors.
Yeah, I don't know. We might have to hire a reporter to cover this trial because there's going to be such great conservative tears all around. So the point I was making is, Anna, if this group is running an actual con, they would file those lawsuits so they can go to court and go, hey, we tried, but it turns out there was no evidence that Trump had actually won the election. There was no evidence of fraud, and Trump himself lost, and his allies, his other allies, have lost 38 cases in a row. So obviously we were right that there was no evidence, and we were right to withdraw those, so I get to keep all the money. So it might have been part of this scam in the first place, but maybe it's not a scam. Maybe they actually did go to court and they were like, oh, this isn't gonna work, we don't have any evidence. Okay, let's just drop the lawsuits and keep the money. Either way, it's a bunch of idiots in a circle of some sort, working each other's chains, if you will, and going, oh yeah, Trump won, man. Yeah, we don't need no stinking evidence. Trump won. Here, take my millions. Oh no, give me my millions back. Oh, I didn't know that we're all idiots. Well, come to find out, you are an idiot, and so we're all thrilled that they took that $2.5 million from you.
Yeah, exactly. The post game today is going to be bonkers. It's going to be bananas. You guys are going to love it. So yes, we are going to play some sound from Trump's interview with Maria Bartiromo on Fox Business. Absolute lunacy there, but I'm bearing the lead. The top story of the day. The GOP blaming Charlie Kirk for what? Delicious. It's my favorite story. You guys are gonna love it. You don't wanna miss it. Become a member, tyt.com/join.
Yeah, on YouTube, so easy. Hit the join button below. On Twitch, if you have Amazon Prime, it's free, but we do get the revenue. So, all right, guys, and please don't forget tyt.com/go. This is the last day of the month. If you could help, that would be amazing. Then we'll only have 1 month left of the fundraising drive. And that Charlie Kirk story is the best thing you're ever gonna see. So hit the join button below on YouTube, tyt.com/join everywhere else. Love you guys, we'll see you there in a minute or two.
Magic, it's showtime, and say 45 minutes. I'm hosting today. Now I know what you're thinking, JR, your face is already perfect, but you know what? I still need to apply some makeup. I went through this process, right? A few years ago, when I realized that I was gonna have to wear makeup on the show. I had to go through like finding out what my undertones were. You guys know what those are? I got my MAC Cosmetics. It says SPF 15 foundation, broad spectrum. But apparently what I have is red undertones, and I think pores are not supposed to be seen. I need all these things to be confirmed for me. These sponge things don't work for me. You gotta use your hands. At least I do. That's how the magic really happens. So we're gonna go through a tutorial how to make the magic happen from beautiful to beautifuler. Let's go. I've already been moisturized. That's the first thing. But moisturization already happened. We go raw. All hands. Pick up a couple streaks. This is the guy we were putting on makeup. We got dots. There's some shiny points that generally happen. First of all, here we go. You dust here. I'm putting way too much, but you dust. Oh, get the excess off. You don't want chunky powder. There's like a T-zone, I think, right? Mine is a double T-zone. Because I went middle and another cross. Make sure your nose isn't all shiny. People get on you for it. They'll say, that's not a good point you made on there, JR. Your nose is shiny. You guys are picky like that sometimes. I think that's about it, fellas and ladies. See you guys next time. Bitsies.
This isn't Anderson Cooper. If you say some BS, I'm not simply gonna let it slide and then move on to the next thing.
This is what the establishment does not understand about politics. You can change the conversation.
This is my place in that broader revolution.
We first have to fight to prove that we are human. We then have to fight for our freedom. Then we fight for our equality. And now we are fighting for our survival because your militarized police force thinks it's okay to shoot us at any point in time.
Look at what's happening in society today, and it's hard not to think about what was going on in the 50s and 60s.
We're all out here. Just everybody that cares about where this country's going are out here.
We are gonna win this fight. We are gonna transform this country.
Whoever wins this primary wins the seat.
We just took down one of the top establishment Democrats in the country. Down goes Crowley! Down goes Crowley!
This is the beginning.
What do we got? We got 202 in the house.
Best moment of my life, I guess, would have to be when the kid was born. Like, because suddenly that meant I served my purpose. Very close second, the day we sold Clerks. That changed my life. In fact, Harley wouldn't have been born if I hadn't sold Clerks. So that noise. Clerks, probably the biggest day, best day of my life. It led to everything else. I got the wife and the kid because Clerks happened. So don't tell the kid, but Clerks.
Our teachers are suffering, and we won't even cut 10% of the money going to military contracts.
The cost of one modern heavy bomber is this: a modern brick school in more than 30 cities.
A tiny sliver of the defense budget would pay for 395,000 teachers.
We're talking about the future of the country. We're talking about the nation's youth and making sure that we are competitive globally. And the only way to do that is to make sure that we provide quality education for our young people.
All right, back on the post game. Tons of stories to get to today. So let's just dive right in. Go ahead, Anna.
All right, let's do it.
And then they did dumps. They call them dumps, big, massive dumps in Michigan and Pennsylvania and all over.
Well, that was just a quick snippet of Donald Trump's interview with Maria Bartiromo on Fox Business. This was the first lengthy interview that Donald Trump, did following the loss of the general election. And he's continuing on with the same insane, unfounded claims of voter fraud. I do want to remind you all, before we get to all the various clips from this interview, that the Trump campaign has engaged in a total of 38 failed actions in trying to prove voter fraud, okay? They've either withdrawn from cases or had judges rule against them because of a lack of evidence, which is why I keep repeating that these claims of voter fraud are unfounded. Now, with that said, Donald Trump distanced himself from Sidney Powell, who was initially one of the Trump campaign lawyers. But it's funny that he did so because he's just repeating her lunatic claims during the interview with Maria Bartiromo, including this one.
You start with these machines that have been suspect, not allowed to be used in Texas, the Dominion machines, where tremendous reports have been put out. We have affidavits from many people talking about what went on with machines. They had glitches. You know what a glitch is? A glitch is supposed to be when a machine breaks down. Well, no, we had glitches where they moved thousands of votes from my account to Biden's account. And these are glitches. So they're not glitches, they're theft. They're fraud, absolute fraud.
Again, this was a claim that was made popular by Sidney Powell, who has, essentially been completely distanced from the Trump campaign. She's been disregarded, she's been disposed of, and it's amazing because again, Donald Trump is repeating the same insane things that she said. There's absolutely no evidence that Dominion, in any way switched votes from Trump to Biden. The Trump campaign has failed to prove that. That's why they keep losing these court cases. And I also want to just quickly note that Donald Trump spoke for a full 6.5 minutes before Maria Bartiromo jumped in. And when she did finally jump in, all she did was aid and abet him. It was beyond a softball interview. This was an interview specifically meant to enable the ridiculous and divisive election fraud claims coming out of the Trump campaign.
Yeah, so there's the very funny and the very serious part of this. They all over social media now. The right wingers are actually, with a straight face, talking about the massive dumps all over the election. I don't know that if it didn't start as a 8chan kind of trolling thing, or some sort of I don't know if Ken Klippenstein's behind it. It's a left-wing trolling operation. I don't know, but hey, let's get idiot MAGA guys to talk about massive dumps. And how there was dumps all over the election. And here they are, all the way up to the chief idiot talking about it. Everything he said was a complete and utter lie. Remember, Sidney Powell said she was gonna have a fire hose. Every time I say fire hose, I wanna do this. Fire hose of evidence. 0-38. So the Kraken finally was released, by the way, if you don't, after they cut her loose, Sidney Powell filed a couple of cases anyway, including in Georgia. Everything is misspelled. It's like a drunk person or someone on meth typed it out and didn't bother spell checking. And none of it makes any sense. There's zero evidence in there, as always. So, now the serious part is that Trump is poisoning the culture of half this country. Because remember, it's so hard for people that are not in the cult to understand how the cult thinks. When the dear leader says something, they believe it completely, utterly, immediately, without any questioning. In fact, if anyone questions what the dear leader said, they'll be furious. So the minute he says those outrageous, fantastical things, they immediately believe it's true. They're like, oh yeah, there was a dump in the election. Somebody took a dump in the middle of the election and all those votes were switched. Thousands of votes were switched immediately from Trump to Biden. Well, everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. They were switched immediately. No, you don't need evidence. No. That's the dumping is the thing with the evidence, right? Kraken/dumb/Trump, right? So half this country, only 3% of Trump voters believe Biden actually won the election. 73% say it was definitely stolen, and the others are still thinking about it, like 20 some odd percent. Probably stolen, but I'm not sure. I don't know if it was the Kraken or the dump. But so it's funny and it's not. That's 70 million some odd lunatics running around going, it's stolen, dumped. And then you have if it's on TV, they believe it. Look, it's true of Democrats as well as Republicans. If Rachel Maddow says anything, and I don't mean to pick on Rachel, anyone on MSNBC, and by the way, it could be now massive right-wingers they have on MSNBC. For a lot of folks in our audience are also above 65. We love you guys, lower percentage. It doesn't matter, we love you. And a lot of those folks are from the old days. But on average, if you're above the age of 45, certainly 55, 65, and MSNBC says something, you go, oh yes, that's right. No, Medicare for all will cost more. Even though every study shows it costs less, it will cost more. I heard it on MSNBC, right? And same with these guys. So Bartiromo doesn't question, goes, oh my God, it's disgusting. We're gonna get to some more clips. They go, oh well, okay, it must be true. Trump and Bartiromo agree, so it's obviously true. So that poison is in the bloodstream of American politics now. So let's continue showing you how he's pulling this off.
All right, so let's take a look at the next video where Trump restates something that's already been debunked through the courts in Pennsylvania.
The mail-in ballots are a disaster. They sent millions and millions and millions of mail-in ballots. I'm sure you know people that got 2, 3, or 4, because I do, where they said, we got 4 ballots. They got one at a country home. Dead people were seeing ballots. But even worse, dead people were applying to get a ballot. They were making application to get ballots. Many. And we're not talking about 10 people. We're talking, there are a lot of dead people that so-called voted in this election. But dead people were, in some cases, in many, many cases, thousands of cases, voted. But also dead people made application to vote. They were dead 10 years, 15 years, and they actually made application.
That's right. Trump believes that dead people made applications to vote, and then they proceeded to vote in this election. I apologize because I misstated something before I tossed to that clip. This wasn't just proven by courts in Pennsylvania, or debunked, I should say, by courts in Pennsylvania. My allegation that Trump is lying here was confirmed by Tucker Carlson, who had run a segment about a dead individual, someone who had died, but who somehow managed to vote in the election. And then later on, he found out that was not the truth and brought the individual in question on his show to clarify that there had been a mistake and that person was very much alive and voted legally. Right, so all of the allegations coming from Donald Trump himself and his unhinged lawyers has either been debunked or has been tossed out of court by judges, including Trump-appointed judges who are like, show us the evidence, and if you don't have it, please stop wasting our time.
Yeah, so first of all, I didn't know that Trump had become Haley Joel Osment. I see dead people. As Edwin, our stage manager here, pointed out, maybe he sees brain dead people asking to vote. Yeah, that was your guys, by the way, Trump. That's true. In terms of the allegations, Tucker made a big deal out of it. They're like, oh, we have found 4 dead people who voted in Georgia. 4. Okay, Biden won by over 12,000. Yeah, but we found 4. And then they're like, yeah, it turns out not 4, not 4. One of them voted as Mrs. blank blank, and that was her husband, and she goes by Mrs. That's the old school. Yeah, okay, so she's not a dead person. Then they found the other person who has the same name as someone who died before, but actually is herself and voted perfectly legally. They're like, okay, fine, 2 dead people, and then later they found those other 2 people as well. They're like, fine, 0 dead people. But we win, we obviously win, we obviously win. No, you don't, no, you don't. You're a bunch of little babies just crying and crying and crying all day long. So that's what he's doing here. Everything he says is a lie. Look, the press should have been 1,000 times harder on him from day one, because it let this fester, it let it sink in. So now when he says the most outrageous, insane things, his dumbass followers that are on his dumbass cult all believe him. Like, oh yeah, dead people, yeah, everybody knows. The dead people were asking for ballots, everybody knows it. We don't have to prove it. In Georgia, you know what their main go-to thing is? Well, Biden couldn't have won Georgia, so we win. That's not a thing. You can't go to court and say he couldn't have won, so we win. That's not a thing. Ay, ay, ay.
So I'm gonna actually skip ahead to the last video, and this one features Maria Bartiromo, because after Trump went on this long tirade listing all of these unfounded claims, did Bartiromo do any fact checking? Did she fill her audience in on how the Trump campaign has lost 38 separate court battles? No, instead, she did this.
This is a very serious turning point for America. So this is no longer about you, President Trump. This is about America. And many people agree with you. According to Reuters, 68% of Republicans and 28% of all Americans, that includes Democrats, believe there was fraud in this election.
Well, it doesn't really matter what his supporters believe. What does matter is that these allegations have gone through the formal process. The Trump campaign has had the opportunity to make its case in front of both state judges and federal judges. And again, in 38 separate cases, the Trump campaign has lost. They have failed. Just a few updates from the weekend. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court, for instance, dismantled a lawsuit brought by Republican congressmen who wanted to literally invalidate every single absentee vote in the state. And so, the state Supreme Court is like, but why? Why would we do that? And so, of course, there's the allegations of fraud. Okay, great. So show us the evidence of widespread fraud that specifically impacts these absentee ballots. We don't have it. Okay, well, then this case gets tossed out. Also, the state's Supreme Court also dismissed it and said the rules were actually, by the way, when it comes to absentee ballots, in the state of Pennsylvania, the rules were implemented by Republican lawmakers. The Republican lawmakers are the ones who brought this lawsuit. It's insane. Then also in Wisconsin, the Trump campaign spent $3 million in order to do a recount in the state of Wisconsin. The recount was actually completed over the weekend. And what we found was that the Trump campaign, yes, did lose. Trump did lose to Biden in the state of Wisconsin, and the recount only found that Biden actually won by an additional dozens of additional votes. So Biden has won by more votes after the recount was done in Wisconsin. And then Cenk, I just want to quickly mention some of the other situations happening in Pennsylvania. So for instance, on Friday, a 3-member panel confirmed unanimously a lower court's decision last week to rebuff the arguments made by Trump's legal team, led by the former New York mayor, Rudy Giuliani, that voting in Pennsylvania was marred by widespread voter fraud. Trump actually lost that state by 80,000 votes, by the way. And so the judge here, who was appointed by Donald Trump, his name is Stefanos Bibas, said this: free, fair elections are the lifeblood of our democracy. Charges of unfairness are serious, but calling an election unfair does not make it so. Changes require specific allegations and then proof. We have neither here. He also said voters, not lawyers, choose the president. Ballots, not briefs, decide elections. The campaign's claims have no merit. And again, just to reiterate, Bibas was appointed by Donald Trump, and the lower court's ruling referred to this specific complaint as Frankenstein's monster haphazardly stitched together. That's how much of a disaster the Trump campaign has been in making its case through the courts.
Everybody on that Third Circuit decision was a Republican appointed judge. 2 from George W. Bush, and the person who wrote the opinion was a Trump appointed judge, as Anna pointed out to you guys. And he was super harsh. He said, not only do you not have any evidence of voter fraud, you didn't even allege it. He did everything but call them schmucks. So, and it's true, Rudy Giuliani said this is not a voter fraud case. Then why did you bring it? And so they then went on to say, well, you should invalidate every vote in Pennsylvania anyway. In the state court case, they wanted to invalidate only the Democratic counties. In the federal case, in the Third Circuit, they wanted to invalidate all the votes because they didn't like that in some of the blue counties, they followed the law and had them, one of the things that they alleged was had people who had made a mistake on their ballot in terms of how they postmarked it or whatever it is, not the content of the votes, right? Were able to cure it. They could do the same exact thing in the Republican counties, and they did, but not at as much of a rate. So they're like, since the Republican counties were dumb, we should invalidate every vote in the state. The Trump appointed judge is like, that's not a thing. There is no remedy where you invalidate other people's valid legal votes because you weren't bright enough to fix your own errors, which you had all the right in the world to do is in a legal way before the vote came in. No. Everything is a no. You guys are dumb. Okay, if you read that whole thing, and I read so much of it in one of the earlier videos, he's practically yelling at them at the top of his lungs. You're an embarrassment. And by the way, in Georgia, we need a recount. There was a recount in Georgia. There was a hand recount. They recounted every vote by hand. Fraud. Yeah, dumps. And guys, I can't emphasize it enough. And one of the reasons I'm emphasizing it is because I'm tired of punching down to some of the folks who are just can't figure things out in this country. That they're not that bright, and I'm starting to feel bad about punching down, okay? But we've got to get rid of this guy, and he's trying in every way to do a political coup, and his zombies believe him 1,000,000%. So these zombies are all out there, and I feel like we progressives are the only ones fighting them. The Democrats are like sipping tea, they're leaning back, they're like, oh yeah, oh, they're trying to appoint different electors. Hey, progressives, you go out there and fight them and see how it turns out, okay? The media who did a good job in the beginning, now they've kind of gone away from it. But he's still there, and he's still got 70 million people like zombies walking around going, nope, dumps. We know it, dumps.
They call them dumps, big, massive dumps.
That's what MAGA's reduced to.
Okay. Let's get to my favorite story of the day, and then I can retire because this is just the story that like made life worth living. So good. Hold on. Let's hold on for a second because I got Cenk gets criticized a lot, and even I'm hard on him, and I give him a lot of bust nuts on this show. Like, let's all admit that. But I got to give him credit where credit is due. He held on to this story because he knew I would love it so much. Like, this broke a few days ago, but he wanted to cover it with me. So he's a good guy. Got to give him credit for that. And I'm glad that he did it because, again, my favorite story of the year. All right, so. Okay, so. Donald Trump is not winning with the young vote. In fact, less young people voted for him in 2020 versus 2016. He lost support among young voters, despite the fact that the Trump campaign worked pretty closely with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA. That's the organization that would have you believe that young people are like really gung-ho about Donald Trump and how he only cares about the stock market. Okay, but it turns out that after the numbers came out, after we knew more about the demographics that voted for Trump versus voted for Biden, the GOP is trying to place blame on someone or something or an organization for why Trump lost support. And so Trump allies alike, according to Politico, and you should read this whole piece, it's fantastic. Alike were struck by the president's poor performance with the 18 to 29-year-old crowd, especially in a cycle with surging youth turnout. In nearly every Midwestern battleground state that mattered to Trump's reelection, the president performed worse among young voters than in 2016. Trump ceded ground in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, 2 states he lost. He also regressed in Arizona, another critical state that slipped away. By the way, Arizona has officially certified the election results today, so tasty, tasty. In Pennsylvania, President-elect Joe Biden actually won young voters by a 20-point margin compared to Hillary Clinton's 9-point advantage in 2016. In Wisconsin, Biden won the state's youngest voters by a 16-point margin, a dramatic rise from Clinton's razor-thin edge in 2016, and a significant swing in a state Trump only lost by 20,000 votes. So you have some context there. You have an idea of just how much support Trump lost among young voters and how much support Biden gained among young voters, not because young voters are necessarily excited about Biden, but because they hated Trump so much, they just wanted to get him out. And so why did they hate Trump? Well, I mean, if you're looking for a scapegoat, the scapegoat should probably be the candidate who couldn't tailor his message to young people during his campaign events. He would do campaign speeches toward millennials and Zoomers, and he would talk about 401ks. Like, some millennials, sure, might be in a super lucky position to be able to contribute to their 401ks, or to their retirement account, whatever it is. But the fact of the matter is, again, a lot of young people are struggling with student loan debt. They're struggling with all sorts of economic issues that Trump did not speak to at all. And then on top of that, younger conservatives, even younger conservatives, are a little less likely to be rabidly racist as Trump is, right? So they do see, the majority of young conservative voters do see racism as a serious problem in the country, and they tend to care more about climate change than older conservatives. But of course, the Republican establishment isn't going to blame Donald Trump for his terrible decisions. They're looking for someone else. So they've decided to blame Charlie Kirk. I'm like salivating. Like, I love it so much. I love this story so much. So Charlie Kirk, who has been bootlicker #1 for Donald Trump, is now being thrown under the bus. So others faulted the Trump campaign, accusing the president's top aides of outsourcing his youth outreach program to Turning Point Action, the political action arm of the conservative campus group Turning Point USA. Two Trump campaign aides who have worked closely with Kirk said the campaign had its own youth outreach efforts that went beyond voters who are still in college. These aides described Turning Point's messaging as too, this is the best part, sycophantic, to bring in young voters who might align more closely with conservatism, but remain apprehensive about Trump himself. So Charlie Kirk was just licking those boots a little too hard. Okay, just a little, take it light, be gentle on those boots, Charlie Kirk. Be gentle on those boots, or else you're gonna be thrown under the bus, and that's exactly what happened here. I love it.
That's amazing that they say, well, his problem was he kissed Donald Trump's ass too much. Well, that's true generally, but I don't know that that really is the reason why he didn't win younger voters. So first of all, let's just acknowledge that all of these things are just media campaigns with no substance at all. So all this like Blexit, Yexit, Texit, you name it. Oh yeah, young people are leaving, it's a Yexit. Black people are leaving, it's a Blexit. Yeah, Turks are leaving, it's a Texit. Yeah, it's true, all of them are happening. And so all they gotta do is put it on Twitter, and then Trump's like, oh my God, it's happening. All the young Turks viewers are gonna vote for me. No, they're not, nobody ever said that, it's not true. It's Texit though, it's a hashtag, it's gotta be true, right? So the big guy's in favor of Kirk, because all he cares about is ass kissing, and Charlie Kirk, to his credit, figured out, hey, that's my grift here. And that's the grift I keep on giving you. Probably got, I mean, the amount of free money he got in these last 4 years from right-wing billionaires is too depressing to talk about. The only good news about it is that it was all burnt, lit on fire. I can't wait for them to sue him. We did the story earlier today of a right-wing donor who gave $2.5 million to some Trump ethics group. So we're gonna challenge the vote and show the voter fraud. Come to find out there is no voter fraud, he wants his money back. Oh no, you schmuck, that's not how it works. So I bet you some of these donors are like, I thought there was gonna be a Yexit. There was no Yexit, I want my money back. No, you idiots, young people aren't conservative, they just aren't. That Charlie Kirk is not gonna turn that around with his ham-handed dumbass propaganda. He's a joke. The overwhelming majority of young people in this country, if they know Charlie Kirk at all, know him as a hilarious joke. The only people who take him seriously are the people he's grifting, which is dumbass Republican donors. So here, let me tell you, they lost young voters from 2016 to 2020 in Arizona, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So important note there, guys. That means, and it also happened in Georgia too. Young people won this election for Joe Biden and defeated Donald Trump. The difference between the votes of young people in 2016 and 2020 made the difference. So in a way of thinking, you could say that Biden owes his presidency to young people. Now he owes it to a lot of people, right? But that's a good way of framing it. Now, will Biden do anything for those young people? Very, very unlikely. I'm just keeping it real, okay? But why? Why are they going in that direction? Is it because that somehow there was a reverse Yexit? No, it's just that the younger generation is the most progressive generation of anyone's lifetime in American history. I've been telling you that for years now. Why? Because apparently I'm the only one that could read in Washington, because I can read the polls and then I tell you what the polls are. And the numbers are massive. They're incredibly progressive. Now I'll prove it with one simple set of facts here. They even asked the young Trump voters. So these are people who voted for Trump and are young. And even they don't really like his positions. 60% of them said that racism was a somewhat or very serious issue. Trump doesn't agree. Even his young voters, 60% of them are like, yeah, I'm voting for him, but racism is a serious issue. This guy's no, right? 52% said they were concerned about climate change. Donald Trump says that it's a Chinese hoax. 61% identified as conservative, and you might say, well, that's good. No, normally for older Republican voters, 3/4 of them identify as conservative. Only 61% of young Trump voters are saying conservative. Why? You know why? Because they're embarrassed to be conservatives. Because now being a conservative means you're a low IQ person. You're part of a cult whose main driving force is fear and hatred. So less people are calling themselves conservative among younger people because it's flat out embarrassing. And you thought Charlie Kirk was gonna turn that around with his obvious, hilarious, clownish propaganda? Well, the one true thing that Charlie Kirk has ever said is, I live like a capitalist every day, Cenk. He does.
What do? I get charity every single year.
And so like a capitalist in this particular way, and a bad one, one with no principles or ethics, he ripped off other rich people, and he got all their money and gave nothing in return.
And you know what? The market has decided what it wants to do with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
Can't play with them, can't win with them, can't do it.
Let's see if they ever catch on any of these riffs, you know? Next thing you know, they'll be like, I can't believe Candace Owens didn't get most black people to vote for us. Can't believe it, I thought that Brexit was really happening. So last things here are two wonderfully bitter quotes from the Kirk camp, okay? A person close to Kirk told Politico, instead of trying to scapegoat Turning Point Action, a completely outside, separate and independent entity that's still fighting for election integrity, maybe that's what the campaign should be doing. Oh, what happened? Now are you mad at the Trump campaign? Wait, hey.
Tasty.
Boot boy, I thought your job was cleaning those boots every day, you know, with your tongue and otherwise. What do you mean it was the campaign's fault? Are you saying it was Donald Trump's fault? Hey, everybody, Charlie Kirk says Trump's an idiot. You know, guy can't buy a comb, but he's got it all figured out. Anyway, last thing, second quote. He says, he gave the president a platform when it was exceedingly hard and nobody could get it done on the campaign. Nobody could get the president a platform, but Charlie Kirk did? He's the president of the United States. He's got all the platforms in the world. But see, the delusion is thick with all of these guys. So the Kirk aide, who probably is Kirk, comes out and goes, yeah, you know, I was the only one who could get Donald Trump on any kind of media. It was me, and I can't believe they're not thanking me for it. Send more checks, send more checks. How's that working out for you, Charlie?
What do? I get charity every single year.
So good, so good. They're doing massive dumps.
They call them dumps, big massive dumps.
It's so good. It's so good. All right, that does it for today's show. TYT Sports is next on Twitch. Make sure you check that out. If you're not watching us on Twitch and you're wondering, wait, you guys have a Twitch channel? We do. All you need to do is go to twitch.tv/TYT, and that's where you can find all of the wonderful Twitch exclusive programming, by the way, in addition to other programming like TYT Sports. So check it out. And I think that's it.
They call them dumps, big, massive dumps.